Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area brawler, Skylar Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your colonial champion, Shawn McMahon. And welcome and happy 100th episode of the Court-Martail Podcast. I am your colonial champion, Shawn McCarty, squeaking his voice to the rafters because he's so excited to talk about Shane McMahon for so long. But with episode 100, as we hope, here comes the money, because money talks. Here comes the money. Money, 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 money. Now, to join me in this discussion and to help bring in the money, as the man who has been purported to be the draw of the Court-Martail Podcast since he has joined as co-host and has done a phenomenal job when he has been asked to host for one reason or another, a man I am very, very happy to have here for episode 100 of the Court-Martail Podcast, the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour. He is the Bay Area brawler himself, Skylar Greenberg. How you doing, my man? Happy 100.
I'm swimming in those gold coins, that Bitcoin, all that wonderful cryptocurrency stuff.
Right. Well, we have both crypto and real currency, and if we get good enough, maybe we'll have currency do a special recorded song for the Court-Martail Podcast. It could go anywhere now that we've gotten through the first 100 episodes. But with the episode 100 comes a lot. And I say this every week, but I mean it no more than I do today. We have a lot to talk about. We've got 3 matches, a big spotlight. We've got a credible 2 sets of topics. 2 topics, one about the first 100 episodes and then another one which relates. But before we get into any of that, we've got a hell of a lot of news to talk about. Roll that intro. Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the Wrestle News with Skylar Green.
That is right, folks. It is the news of the week with the Bay Area brawler. Sorry, I was doing a Shane McMahon.
He was going to say you turned into Pat James Regan there for a second. Shout out to those of you who know what that reference is.
We'll find a way to get those references in there. Anyways, news of the week with the Bay Area brawler, Skylar Greenberg at your service. And we have a lot of things that we have to talk about.
Let's get it.
Now, we're going to eschew from the Shane McMahon stuff for a second, because this has been an ongoing story with Matt and Jeff Hardy, and specifically Jeff Hardy's exit from WWE.
Yes, more developments.
Well, we have those developments, and we actually may finally have a little bit of an answer for about what happened with Jeff Hardy's exits.
All right, let's hear it.
So Matt Hardy was doing a Twitch stream on, ironically, let's see here. Let me get this real quickly. I want to get this information correct.
Yeah, gotta get our facts right. We used to just be loosey-goosey with the details, no longer. 100 episodes in, we gotta have something to show for ourselves.
So this was January 31st, about a week ago, give or take. He was doing a Twitch stream with his wife, who was reading him questions.
Okay, interesting, but okay.
Thank you, Rebby.
Oh, was it Rebby or was it Jeff's wife?
No, Matt Hardy and his wife, Rebby.
Oh, okay, got it.
So, let me go ahead and start reading what Matt Hardy had to say about this, all right? Are you ready?
To the questions that he gave Rebby to ask him.
No, that Rebby gave him from the viewers.
Oh, okay, I understand. This is viewer questions. I understand now. Okie dokie. I am with you now. Continue.
So, from Matt, and I quote...
Oh, jeez. We're dealing with enough Shane. Can we not do Michael Cole, too?
Well, you know we have to watch that Michael Cole versus Jerry the King Lawler match at some point.
Oh, but not today. Not on episode 100.
No.
Episode 102, maybe. we'll discuss that. Because episode 101, by the way, just a good time to mention it, is our season 3 show premieres, NWL and ACPW. Now that we had our draft last month, we are going to kick it off with a bang for season 3, so stay tuned for that.
All right. So whenever my brother ended up being released, he had taken a drug test. Usually these drug tests come back in 10 to 14 days. Those 10 to 14 days have been up for him, and he never got a result. And he was curious as to where his result was, because he knew he had passed his drug test because he had not been doing any drugs of any sort. And he's been clean for a while. And I know there were this issue where they said Jeff Hardy had this erratic behavior. He jumped over the guardrail or whatever. Hello, he's Jeff Hardy. He's a weird dude. That's kind of what he does.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting defense, Matt. Because I mean, he's a weird dude, but it's not like he just like does irregular stuff for the sake of irregularity. Not at that point in Jeff's career.
Right. And by the way, what we're talking about is the match that he had with Drew McIntyre and Big E against the Bloodline at a house show in Texas.
A live event, Sky. Your terminology must be WWE appropriate.
Fine. WWE live event in Corpus Christi where Jeff Hardy was selling and he acted weird and he jumped the guardrail because he didn't feel good or something.
That's what we thought at the time. Matt Hardy's saying, well, Jeff's just weird, right? That's kind of a weird defense, if I'm going to be honest there, Matt.
So Rebby Hardy asked from the fans, one of their questions, if Jeff's erratic behavior had been addressed by anyone. And here's Matt Hardy's answer to that question. Well, the erratic behavior is why they gave him a drug test and they sent him home. I don't think he's addressed it since WWE. He's addressed it with me, and he was saying that he knew at that point he was working for WWE is a very stressful job. And I'm not going to say, I'm not here to bury WWE because I love WWE and Vince McMahon and everyone who's there. I wouldn't be who I am, and I wouldn't have this life that I have right now. So I have great appreciation. I'm very grateful for everything I've done for them. And grateful for every opportunity they've given me. It's all good. But it's also a very stressful environment, as well anyone who has worked there knows. So I feel like Jeff was just kind of stressed out about different things. And he just told me, he confessed to me, he said that when he went over the guardrail, he said he knew he was done. He was just done there. He was literally done with the match, so he felt done.
Well, I can't necessarily refute that part of it, because by all accounts, working 300 plus days a year with all of the live events, and just the political nature of that place, and the fact that WWE are so like petty and they play mind games with you for like no reason, I don't really necessarily dispute anything that Matt said there. That's not as weird a defense as Jeff's just kind of weird, so that's why he did it.
Well, here's the part of the arguments where Matt Hardy's viewpoint starts to break down.
Oh, okay.
So Rebby Hardy also asked another fan question if it was a calculated move to get released. And here's Matt Hardy's comments. I don't think he did it intentionally, trying to get fired. He does shit like that all the time. There's times where he'd be in the ring, wrestling or working, and he just goes in the business for himself because there's just something that he feels. That's how he is. He's not a very emotionally supercharged person, and then he follows his emotions and instincts. If something feels a certain way, regardless if it's not the best case scenario for the outline of the match or scenario you're working in, he just does things. I think that's one of the reasons he is as beloved as he is. He's a very emotional and passionate and driven guy. If he has a feeling, he just goes with it. So that's what happened on this occasion, and he went with it.
I don't buy that explanation. I really don't. Just saying that Jeff is like, oh, well, he just goes with the flow. But here's the thing. It's not like Matt Hardy can answer that question. And because legally speaking, Matt comes out and blabs, yeah, he did that to intentionally get released from his contract. That is lawsuit grounds. And that is Matt knows better than to say overtly that, yeah, Jeff probably did it just to leave because it was too stressful for him, which is probably the case. But Matt also knows that he can't overtly just come out and say that. Otherwise, somebody's going to use that or hear that at WWE's brass and send the legal team and Jerry McDivitt out to sue for breach of contract.
This definitely feels like a question that Matt can't answer. Like, he can answer the other questions, but this is one where Jeff Hardy has to say it.
Yeah.
But of course, if Jeff Hardy says it, he's going to get sued for all he's worth.
Right. So that was kind of one of those questions that you have to PR in order to save face, because if you tell the truth, you can end up in a world of hurt.
I know, it's just whatever.
This is still developing, though. I think there's still more that we're going to hear from this in the weeks to come.
Anyways, let me go ahead and move on to the final part of Matt Hardy's comments. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Anyway, he took this drug test. He ended up being released just a few days later, and they never got the results of this drug test. And he obviously passed all the drug tests he was doing because he'd been there for a while. And then it's 10, 14 days later, and he hasn't gotten back his drug test. It also leaked out on the internet that he thought this was going to be a private conversation. They said either go to rehab or be released. They kind of gave him an ultimatum, and he just said, okay, you can release me then, because I don't need to go to rehab. This was his mentality at the time. 3 weeks later, he hasn't gotten his drug test back, and especially because that little bit of information that was either go to rehab or release was leaked, and is now public information. He definitely wanted to see the results of this drug test. 3 weeks out, he kind of asked to see it, and he didn't have it. He was kind of fighting, scratching, clawing to get the drug test, and was kind of getting the runaround. Then he got a call, and this has been reported online, from John Laurinaitis, and they had offered to induct him into the Hall of Fame. That's not made up. That's a real thing that happened. And he just asked for his drug test at the very end of the conversation. Said, no, I want my drug test. I want the clean result, just to clear his name, if that makes sense. I think it should, especially given his history. So after my brother and his wife dealt with WWE and the drug testing company quite a bit, they actually spoke with a lawyer, and it kind of helped them out a little bit. And just a couple of days ago, he got the drug test back, and the drug test was compliant. Everything was a negative. He passed on all levels.
So, pretty much what that means is that WWE was trying to tell a narrative for the sake of trying to tell a narrative. More than anything else, because I think WWE knew that, and maybe they were just trying to stir up some drama or some BS, and Jeff just wasn't having it, which then goes back to, well, did you get released on purpose? And, well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But the fact that drug test, it was basically a refusal of that drug test, really tells a lot about, and the fact that Jeff needed a lawyer at all tells a lot about WWE's mindset. They hate having egg on their face, but this is one of those times where the egg is all over their faces.
I just find it curious that of all the things they tried to bribe Jeff Hardy with, the Hall of Fame is what they chose.
And, yeah, well, it's true because, Jeff, not to say that Jeff doesn't deserve to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. He does. He totally does. But again, I said this last week, or the week before. Why are you trying to alienate the Hardys? Why are you trying to do that? Matt was trying to be diplomatic here with saying, I love WWE just in case AEW tanks and he'll need a job. And which is why everyone who's left WWE has been super califragilisticexpialidociously grateful to have been a part of WWE.
Because you never know when those WWE Legends contracts require you to get a little bit of money.
That's
from
right.
Your video game or your merchandise.
You just never know, because WWE is such a juggernaut and has recorded record profits, even though they released like 90 people. You never know when WWE is going to have to be the fallback.
Again, this all feels dirty to me. This all feels dirty because of the things that WWE has done for years.
Yeah, but why, Jeff? Why are you doing? What was the end game here? That's what I'm not understanding. What was the end game for WWE here? To say that he'd go to rehab? Oh, I just put it together. They wanted Jeff to go to rehab so then they could put him in the Hall of Fame and say, look how he got his act together to be here for the Hall of Fame. Look what we did to help Jeff Hardy. I just put it together. That's exactly what they tried to do.
No, if anything, it was a case of Jeff Hardy did something weird at that house show, and WWE's like, listen, we have to look like the good guys here, okay? So we're going to pin it all on Jeff, because we're going to use Jeff Hardy's drug history against him. We're going to do the rehab ultimatum thing.
Yeah.
And then that kind of fell on its face because Jeff Hardy's clean. So we're like, we need to shut this up. Let's give him a spot in the Hall of Fame. Maybe we'll make things better.
And not for nothing, if I'm Jeff Hardy, I would never want to work for Vince McMahon ever again after that. Because basically what you've just said to me, if I'm Jeff Hardy, basically what you said to me is, we don't trust you to be sober. I know you've worked a lot at it, but we don't trust you that you're actually sober. We think it's a whole load of crap, and we're going to use that against you. We don't trust that you actually have it in you to do it. And if your company that's supposed to have your back and give you so many opportunities doesn't trust you, the person, no matter what Jeff's done in the past, but he was there for how long? 6 years? He was the sole survivor at Survivor Series, only to lose to Rollins. It's not like they weren't treating him well. It's not like they didn't know him and know the changes he'd made, but they still didn't trust him when just the slightest thing was up. And I would feel so disrespected by that. And then they refuse to give you the drug test when you know it's clean. That's just a big slap in the face. Why are you doing this to Jeff Hardy? What was the end game here, WWE? Or is it like everything else that you do that's so short-sighted that it hurts you in both the short term and the long term because you're thinking that's short-sighted?
They were thinking of protecting their image, and they were trying to protect themselves against Jeff Hardy's drug history and drug demons, which is fair. But it's also kind of stupid because if it backfires, it makes you look bad. Granted, they look bad either way. But really, when has WWE not looked bad in these situations?
I mean, what good publicity has WWE gotten of late other than that Q4 earnings report?
Well,
I'll wait. Yeah, exactly. What else
Anyways, I'm looking forward to watching Jeff Hardy on AEW TV. Am I right, Shawn?
Well, he definitely could be showing up there. I mean, they're kind of, at least the little piece that I gathered was that's the end game, is to have the Hardys reunite, do a little tag team run, and then probably fade into the sunset. They're looking to pretty much close it out, and then that be that. Which, honestly, and I love Matt, but I would not be upset not seeing Matt Hardy on television anymore, given what he's done in AEW.
Same.
I love the man. I've met him twice. By all accounts, he was a great dude. But I'm over it. I'm over his in-ring stuff. I'm over the Matt Hardy family clan of goons. All of it. Enjoy your retirement and take care of your 58 kids, Matt.
And speaking of over it, we're going to talk about the Royal Rumble because everyone was over it by the time it ended.
Yeah, everyone was over it by the time the Rumble match started.
Oh, boy howdy.
Yeah.
So, we've given our review of the show. I think we don't need to bring that up again.
I'd rather not get the stomach acid involved in talking about that show again.
The consensus, by the way, from most fans was that the show sucked.
Yeah, it turns out that our opinions were actually not that far off from what the collective opinion was of that show.
But there are details that have been coming out for the past week or so that highlight how badly both the men's and women's Rumbles were booked. Shall we begin?
Let's do it.
So I'm going to drop different tidbits. You give me your reaction to the tidbits as I release them.
Sounds good.
The first things first, Triple H and TJ Wilson, better known as Tyson Kidd, are both usual contributors to the construction of the matches. TJ Wilson, Tyson Kidd usually does the women's match, and Triple H does the men's match. And with Triple H in particular, he likes to focus on giving guys moments to shine in the Rumble. And that was his specialty in putting these matches together for the last few years. Unfortunately, both men were not at that show.
No, so we got Diet Triple H and Diet Tyson Kidd.
You can definitely tell with the men's match how badly it missed having Triple H behind the helm.
It missed a lot of timing. Like, nobody felt important and nobody got, like, highlights in, really, except for Brock Lesnar.
Which we'll get to in a second.
Which we'll get to.
Apparently, with the Royal Rumble matches, both of them, there was a lot of issues because of COVID-19 and not being sure who was going to be available or who wasn't going to be available. So they tried to make as many offers to people to have them on standby in the event that someone could not go.
Sure.
But that also kind of led to the chaos because the planning of the Rumbles was really thrown off and you didn't know who was going to be there until the day of.
Until really the last second. I mean, there was confusion, at least, and I'm sure I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but there was a lot of confusion up until the match itself, as it was happening.
Yep. And again, this is one of the things where I feel bad for WWE because they're trying to book in the middle of a pandemic and an illness that could take out anybody,
Right.
no matter how healthy.
Yeah, you can't fault them for that, but you can fault them for the otherwise crappy booking across the board.
Now, apparently, with the women's match, we're going to focus on that first. There were a lot of women who were offered spots in the Rumble and refused them.
Do we have names?
Nia Jax.
So, okay, better off without it.
The Iconics.
Better off without them.
Bayley was not healthy enough to compete.
That's fair. Get her healthy, because when she's healthy, she's going to revitalize that women's division. I forgot how crucial she was until she was gone.
It's one of those things where you don't realize how badly you miss someone until they're gone.
Yeah, how can I miss you if you don't go away?
Asuka also was not healthy enough to compete. And honestly, she would have been added something.
Well, I as much as you and I have critiqued Asuka has been gone. Like, disappeared for like a year and a half. And I'm at the point where I'm like, all right, you know what? If she came in and just wreaked havoc on everybody, I wouldn't have a problem with it. It was just what they had turned her into prior to her leaving. And what was her injury? Do you know?
She had surgery. I'd have to double check. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Asuka's deal is, but I mean, to be fair, there was a time when Asuka would feel valuable, and honestly, if Asuka had shown up at that Women's Rumble, it would have gotten a pop.
So her arm was in a sling, so that probably suggests an arm.
Oh, maybe like rotator cuff surgery, because that takes a long time to heal from.
Right, well, I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, not confirmed, but that's my guess.
The other thing, too, again, we have to remember, Asuka is 40. She's not a spring chicken.
That's right.
It's one of those things where the miles on the body.
And she's put a lot of miles in those first 20 years of wrestling. If you watch some of her stuff in Japan, some of that, like, punch me and break my face so I can be proven to be as tough as everybody else kind of Asuka, the stuff that got her attracted in the first place.
Right. Apparently, Sasha Banks, who did end up being in the Rumble match, she was still not fully healthy, so that's why her run was not as long as it could have been.
That's fair. I also don't... To me, Sasha is the fourth of the horsewomen. So I'm not necessarily like that broken up about that. But again, structurally, you couldn't have just waited a couple, like literally a minute and a half so that Bianca Belair could get in and then they get that stare down and then you eliminate Sasha Banks?
Which was also apparently a specialty of Tyson Kidd and what he does, being that he learned from Triple H. And that was missing.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah. Very clearly missing.
Now, we're going to move to the Men's Rumble for a second, because there's a lot more that's come out from the Men's Rumble than the Women's Rumble.
Yes.
So, the Men's Rumble was jumbled up and down because of certain things that were going on. One of those things was whether or not Drew McIntyre was going to compete.
Which, as we've discussed, and I still believe he shouldn't have, because in the same way that Asuka, me kind of like wanting to see Bayley again, I really wasn't that excited to see Drew. I would have much rather seen him, like, I know missing WrestleMania would have sucked, but maybe have him show up closer to WrestleMania instead of just like a month afterwards, after you Pillmanize his neck. It's like, that's my problem. You Pillmanize his neck and then he's back in a month? Are you guys paying any attention to what this? No, I just answered my own question. Continue, Sky.
Also, another thing, apparently, is that Drew and Brock was supposed to go longer, but they were running out of time.
Well, they sure wasted a lot of time on this show.
Again, you could have cut that mixed tag team match and just have Edge and Miz and Beth and Maurice do their stories in the Rumble matches, and then do the mixed tag maybe at WrestleMania if you really wanted to draw out the storyline.
Or, take every Roman Reigns angle that lasted 7 minutes and make it 2 minutes. And then you might actually have something.
It's just one of those things where, again, they're milking
their format.
Everything.
It's #bag formatting.
Which, by the way, we will get to in the 3 matches that we have this week, because you can see the milking in all 3 of them.
Oh yeah, it's something that Vince has not been shy about putting on his program from the get-go.
Right. Now, originally, Riddle was supposed to win the Royal Rumble until they changed it to Brock.
Honestly, I would have been receptive to it. I would have been more receptive to it than I think what the easy response, which is them going with Brock. Which I don't even mind if it was Brock, but again, positioning matters. Formatting matters. You present it right, I wouldn't have minded Brock winning it. But you didn't, so I didn't.
There was also talk about Randy Orton winning it, and supposedly they were considering doing Riddle versus Orton for the WWE title at 38, and it was being pitched by a handful of people, but it sounds like most are not in favor of splitting that tag team.
Yeah, I don't... The problem is I feel like they would just completely gumble up that feud that by the time they got to WrestleMania, nobody'd be interested in seeing it. I don't trust WWE enough to do it.
Plus, Bobby Lashley would have beat Brock Lesnar just to lose the title to Randy Orton if you're going to have Riddle win the Rumble.
Well, at least in Orton's defense, he probably would have won it in the chamber. You know, it wouldn't have
won it in the chamber, but even then.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. And the fact that Orton wins a third Rumble and ties Steve Austin, I'm sure people would take exception to.
Yeah, I don't think people care about that as much.
Although if there was anyone who on that roster who I would say deserves to tie Steve Austin with that record, it probably would be Randy Orton.
It would either be Randy Orton or John Cena, but John Cena's not here.
Yeah, oh no, well, I think the people would dump on John Cena winning it now. At this point, It's way too late in the game to give John Cena a Rumble win. Orton, you could still make the case because he's been consistently there for so many years. And yeah, it would be going to one of the older guys again, but at least it's somebody who is very visibly on their show on a regular basis.
Right. And then let's get to the big one, because we have to talk about the big one. Obviously, Brock Lesnar was the winner of this match. And he was able to get a lot of what he wanted from this match in this match.
Oh, of course.
In particular, the people that he was working with, he picked those people to be in the ring with him.
Oh, like he's the one who chose the final set.
He's the one who advocated for several of the people that were in the final set.
Okay. Well, so that means Brock's the only one who understood that he and Drew were the only two that should be the last two in this Rumble, given the participants involved.
And also that he wanted Randy Orton to be there. Ironically, the Bad Bunny thing, which we'll get to in a second, was funny.
Well, Bad Bunny, you and I both said it. It would have been much better if Brock showed up and then Bad Bunny had to walk into Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
But it seems like nobody knew where Bad Bunny was going.
That's another thing, too. Shane McMahon was trying to fight for... He was the lead producer of this match.
Along with Michael Hayes, and I forget who the third one was.
I don't know.
I
forget.
But
Shane McMahon was fighting for a lot of things that he wanted to do in this match that kept getting refused. Apparently, he put up a hissy fit backstage, bitching, moaning, complaining about not getting the things that he wanted, and was, quote-unquote, a hell to work with.
Shane is probably the only person that Vince cutting his ideas off at the knees might not be the worst thing in the world. Because I'm guessing that Shane really wanted to be like in the final three. I'm guessing Shane was probably more interested in what Shane was going to do rather than about like the context of the whole matchup. And
well, there was a lot of heat on Shane McMahon. And weird things like him being in the Elimination Chamber to set up a feud with Seth Rollins at Mania 38.
Because Shane is important. And Shane has to prove that he's a wrestler, even though he's not.
And then also talking about at one point there was a plan to do Bobby Lashley versus Shane McMahon at Mania.
Oh, Lord. Dear God, no. The only match that would have made sense for Shane to wrestle at Mania is to face Austin Theory. Just because of Vince McMahon and his relationship. That's the only match.
That kind of feels like how it was going to be built towards, right?
Yeah, well, but we said while I maintain that it is stupidity until proven malice, it is self-sabotage, whether by ignorance or otherwise.
Right, and apparently a lot of Shane's ideas had to be cut off by Vince McMahon, and this has ultimately led to Shane McMahon being out of WWE. Now, what we mean by that is that he's not a part of the management team, but he was part of creative, and Shane, in particular, his behavior and the way he acted backstage led to Vince McMahon having no choice but to get rid of Shane. In particular, with Shane McMahon talking about in parts of what he wanted to be booked, there were issues with Bad Bunny's entry number, and WWE didn't want to look bad in front of a celebrity who actually likes wrestling and is willing to work with WWE.
Well, WWE has a really, really bad case of little dick syndrome.
But, I mean, you get it, right?
No, I understand it. I totally understand it. Yeah, like, I get it. But, like, oh, man, we have a pencil-thin rapper. We don't want to mess this up, even though he's going to bury our whole roster. And then I also heard...
No. It's not from that perspective. It's from the perspective of we're working with a major mainstream star, and we don't want to piss him off by just continuously telling him different things.
Right. No, I totally get that. I totally get that, too. And then apparently, and this is something I also caught, I think it was Fightful, was the source that I was looking at before. But apparently, Orton was supposed to come out before Shane did. But they played Shane's music, and Shane was to look to Orton to go out, and Orton's like, I'm not coming out to Here Comes the Money. So Shane had to go out there a spot earlier. And which was for the better, because that Orton pop would have been completely killed by Shane coming out afterwards.
Which is weird if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of like put the little cherry on top of bad formatting, Kevin Dunn plays the wrong music, and out comes Shane. And so, yeah, this just...
Oh, actually, I have that report. It's because Vince Dunn had the wrong... Kevin Dunn. I just called him Vince Dunn again, didn't I?
You did. The
fusion of Vince McMahon and Kevin
That's
Dunn.
horrifying. That is a horrifying image. And I criticize you for making me visualize what a Vince McMahon, Kevin Dunn, big brain tooth baby would look like.
Sorry.
That is grotesque. And Josh Again is now going to make that a member of TAW Gaming. Are you happy with yourself? Are you happy with what you've just done, Skylar?
What, is it just Vince McMahon with butt teeth?
I hope so. Make it happen, Josh Again. Make it happen.
No, why are we doing this? Why are we giving him
You started this, sir. You're the one who brought this idea up.
Well, you're the one responsible for Omega L. So
that's okay. All right. So we're even. Oh Lord, I'm sorry. Continue, Sky.
I need Jack 6 to come over here and go back to the past to save the future from the past and the future.
Hey, don't you bring Jack 6 into this. That's still sensitive topic there, sir. But that's a story for another time. But the point is, speaking of domineering personalities who are from the past who think they can save the future, Shane McMahon had no business booking this Rumble. And then to be a child about it, and, you know, everyone's going to kind of side with Vince here, but it's not like Vince was coming up with the great ideas for this Rumble either.
Well, Vince wasn't a part of it. He was overseeing the entire show, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah, but you can't refute that he probably had stuck his toes into the booking part of that at some point.
Vince actually just stays out of it. He usually lets his people who are bookers actually, do their thing. It's only with the big things that he's involved in directly.
So it seems.
By the way, speaking of big things and things from the past, now we have a new challenger for Roman Reigns at Elimination Chamber in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, right. It's your favorite.
The male Ronda Rousey, Goldberg himself.
I like how Ronda Rousey is the female Goldberg and Goldberg is the male Ronda Rousey.
Because they're both bitches.
But I like how you preface it with each other, like, so, but yeah,
they are the same.
Well, they're exactly actually quite similar. Well, except Goldberg actually got over in wrestling and wasn't a giant baby when he lost.
Well,
he wasn't a baby when he lost, and Vince is just offering him a stupid amount of money. It's not his fault that Goldberg is gonna wrestle a 5-minute match for $2 to $3 million of Saudi money. That's not Goldberg's fault.
Wait, this is the last match in his contract, so
for now.
No, you can't bring him back. You can't.
Well, you say that, Sky, but we said that 4 years ago, after the first round of this, and then it happened again, and again, and again, and again, and then he beat Bray Wyatt for the belt, and again, and again,
and lost to.
And then he went on a losing streak.
Braun Strowman. Oh, I said the name.
That's right. Well, thank God he started going on a losing streak until he beat Bobby Lashley because he had to. But do you think they're dumb enough to actually have Roman drop the belt in Saudi Arabia to Goldberg? My guess is yes.
No. Why would you end the long title reign of Roman Reigns just to give it to to Goldberg?
Because that's what they do. That they love doing that just to troll everybody, and because they like that sweet, sweet Saudi blood money, and because the Saudi prince still thinks it's 1998, he's probably like, yeah, this guy should beat one of the Wild Samoans. You know, they probably thinks that Goldberg ought to win. And who knows what kind of concessions they're making regarding the booking of these shows when they go over there. Otherwise, Undertaker wouldn't have just showed up at the very end of the I Forget What Battle Royal and win the trophy for no reason. He wouldn't have had Shane McMahon be crowned the best in the world against Dolph Ziggler unless this prince thought it was 1999. I mean, we wouldn't have seen Undertaker and Kane versus DX if this dude didn't think it was still the 90s. We wouldn't have had to deal with Shawn Michaels coming out of retirement and then realizing that he should not have come out of retirement. All of that has been done solely because Vince McMahon is choosing to make booking concessions because this guy wants Yokozuna on his program, which is why Babatunde showed up first time.
No, it was the other. It was the sumo guy.
Oh yeah, who I don't remember the name. I was gonna say Dabakato, but that's the same dude.
And where can you see this man? On Shane McMahon's Fight Club.
Yeah, or now as Commander Aziz with Apollo Crews, which that has gone places, boy, hasn't it?
It got him one Intercontinental Championship title win and nothing since.
And thanks for coming. Appreciate you getting that one moment, and we will see you later. Actually, he had a title shot just recently, actually. I think on Friday. He had a triple threat with, I think it was Big E, Sami Zayn, and Apollo Crews. I don't know who won.
No, that was number one contendership.
Or okay, so and I don't know who won that because I don't.
Who cares?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But the point is, Goldberg could 100% win this match. If nothing's set in stone, because think about it, Brock Lesnar wins the Elimination Chamber, gets the WWE title. So now you could have Goldberg face who knows who, and now Roman Reigns loses his belt and now has to go after Brock Lesnar because this is, Brock Lesnar probably F5s Roman Reigns in the middle of the ring so that Goldberg can make the cover. 1, 2, 3, Goldberg wins the belt. Now Roman Reigns, now that Brock Lesnar's got a belt, has to go after Brock Lesnar, and we get a babyface Roman Reigns against the heel Brock Lesnar again at WrestleMania 38. Heard it here first.
So where does Hulk Hogan come in?
At WrestleMania, after the match. When it's done.
No. Hulk Hogan versus Goldberg.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Except it would be NWO Hogan.
Oh my God! Make it happen. No, I'll tell you what. That whole scenario might be the only way that I will actually watch and enjoy WrestleMania is if they go that far into the dementia train. That they actually have Hulk Hogan versus Goldberg and Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte headline WrestleMania. They will go full dementia if they go that way. And you should never go full dementia. It's just the prospect of that is so ridiculously hilarious, but a little piece of me thinks they actually would do it.
Because Hulk Hogan would do it, brother.
Because if the paycheck was right, and he didn't have to do a whole lot of moving around and didn't have to take any bumps,
it would just be Goldberg giving Hulk Hogan one punch and then he starts hulking.
No, it would just be Goldberg trying to spear him and just running into all 4 turnbuckle posts, and then Hulk Hogan just doesn't even bother. He just hulks up from there, big boot, and that's it. Be like a 6-second match. Oh, well, no, it's WWE, so they'd milk what would be a 6-second match into like a 7-minute match, but...
No.
Oh, man. This is what WrestleMania 38 could turn into, folks. And I'll tell you what, I will take full responsibility if this is actually what they do for calling this so accurately. I will take full responsibility for the one who brought this into the cosmos. But at this point, what else are they going to do? They don't even know. They have no idea who's wrestling for the WWE title in WrestleMania. They've openly admitted that.
Yes, it's true. They have openly admitted that they have no idea who's going to wrestle for the WWE title. Like, Bobby Lashley just won the belt. You don't think he's going to do it?
Bobby Lashley's fighting Shane McMahon. I don't know what you're talking about. But, you know what I would have really liked out of this? Just a little bit of fantasy booking here. Instead of having... Oh, Jesus. Instead of having...
That's my answer to your fantasy booking.
That's right. Instead of having... Roman Reigns just completely riggedy wreck Seth Rollins, you have Kevin Owens win this Rumble and then proceed to win the title actually beat whoever, and then have Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens fight for it because they've been teasing a feud between them like they've been friends but they're not friends. But those are 2 guys. That way, if you want to have the big Haas fight with Brock and Roman as the Universal title, you've got 2 workhorse guys who people love watching wrestle, and it would be the second time in 3 years that they've wrestled at WrestleMania, which I think would be even more special, this time in front of fans. And, it doesn't even matter who wins the match, but because you had Seth in the title picture at that point, but that, that's just me, and that's way too logical for what WWE likes to do.
I got nothing.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
That's instead
I'm choking on the idea because it's so terrible.
Yeah. It's just we got Goldberg. We got Goldberg instead.
We could have had anybody else. Literally anybody else.
Could have been. I mean, why not have Kevin Owens go and fight at Saudi Arabia and be like, all right, listen, I didn't really get along with Seth, but I was using Seth, and Seth and I were working together for a lot of this, and now you took Seth away from me, so now I'm going to take something away from you. Roman Reigns.
Well, that's because Kevin Owens lost his qualifying match to Austin Theory to get into the chamber.
Yeah. But, yeah, so then be drastic. Then when Goldberg comes to cut a promo, have Kevin Owens wreck him from behind for taking Owens' title away from him in WrestleMania in 2017. Have Owens get a little bit of revenge and say, all right, now that I'm done with Goldberg, I'm the guy who took out Goldberg, and now I'm coming after your Universal title. Bam. 5 seconds worth of thought just has completely outsmarted most of what WWE is going to book until WrestleMania. What else you got?
Well, all I got is just a real desire to just disconnect from this world and put in some good music.
Well, when you're tired of hearing the crowd chant, Goldberg, Goldberg, when Goldberg is 74 years old and is still fighting in the WWE for $3 million a year, you're probably going to want to put on some sort of headphones or just tune out, like you said, and find something different, something better, something new to listen to that isn't the same old Goldberg. And I've got just the thing, because a new era in entertainment has arrived. AB Productions CT is proud to drag you out of the superficial monotony and overproduced, oversimplified modern musical mud pit with 2 industry-busting artists slowly taking the world by storm. A-Bizzle and White Knux deliver an avant-garde approach to music that blends elements and instruments of a wide number of musical styles, including, but not limited to, hip-hop, R&B, jazz, funk, rock, house, EDM, which is electronic dance music. I haven't asked what EDM stands for. Electronic dance music. So we're all in the same page here. And so much more. It is high time for the music industry to be shaken to its core, so be a part of the foundation-breaking movement by supporting aspiring artists. And right now, you can catch the latest release, The Wax Apocalypse, a 32-track album that took 2 years to come together throughout the whole pandemic. A saga of a lifetime awaits your eager ears. Look for A-Bizzle, spelled A-B-I-Z-Z-L-E, or White Knux, spelled W-H-I-T-E space K-N-U-X on SoundCloud, Apple Music, and Spotify for the entire AB Productions CT discography of over 100 songs and projects, including Retreat, Mixed Bag, Versus from a College Grad, Bare Min, Recovering, and many more. And it's all just a short, quick away. Link in the description. Come join the entertainment revolution with AB Productions CT. Now, Sky, I know, because of our conversations before, that you have actually gotten the chance to listen to this music. So why don't you tell the fine folks out there what your impressions are?
This is definitely one of those albums that is a storyteller. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I haven't listened all the way yet, but there's a lot of ways it goes, and it's very interesting to say the least. But you have to listen to the whole album. You can't just stop halfway.
Yeah, it's like a Lay's chip. You can't just stop at one. You got to go through that whole bag. And I promise you that in those 32 tracks, there is not a whole lot of empty air. It's not that 40% chips, 60% air formula that they've got. It is 100% chips and like 2% the actual wrapping to open the bag, you know, because it's a bag. And I know that's like 102%, but that's how much content's in it. and speaking of a boatload of content, we have hit 100 episodes, folks. And firm handshakes all around. Big round of applause to all of us for making it to 100. Thank you all for those of you who started at day one. You know, we really thank you. And the first of our two topics, and we'll get to the second topic because it's more relevant to the rest of the show, but I'd just like to take a moment to reflect on the first 100 episodes. The very first episode that I ever did, was in 2017. And it was right when Vader passed away. And you can still find these on the Court-Martail podcast channel. And that was long before I really had the structure down for what I really wanted to do, which then turned into the reboot episode at the beginning of 2020, the Royal Rumble review of 2020 when Edge made his return, my evisceration of Dave Meltzer, the first one, the one I did solo. And then, you know, things just sort of took off. And then when June came along and I was looking for new gimmicks, here comes Skylar Greenberg, our perfidiously fantastic co-host. And he and I come up with the idea of ACPW and NWL, and then our friendship blossomed. And now here we are with a whole full year of tandem shows under our belt. How does it feel to get to 100, Sky?
Feels like no time has passed at all.
I know. It's true. It's true. But I don't know whether, you know, at least on my part, this was started before we knew anything about the pandemic. But I have to say that our weekly show has been a really helpful way to kind of get through all that, you know, because it's allowed to have a constant that didn't have to do with like the topics at hand or the world at hand. You know, something where you and I could just take a moment to just be away from it and just share in the love that we have for professional wrestling.
It was something to look forward to each week. I'm looking forward to this conversation, even if I'm not in love with the topics, just because, you know, it's going to be fun to talk about wrestling.
Yeah.
And get away from our troubles. And also, when I was listening to your shows, I'm just like, they're good, but you need something there. So that's why I offered my services to you, and you jumped on it, and it happens.
We didn't really even know, you know, the kind of chemistry you and I were going to have when we started this. You know, it's like we had like little interactions here with like the reviews that we were doing for Josh Again, but like when you start something like this and you go with like a broadcast partner, you don't really know the kind of dynamic, you have with somebody. And, I think that we've really hit our stride as far as like how the show functions now that we've kind of gotten the chance to gel and know each other's sense of humor, what works, what doesn't, and how to really make these shows flow. And I really think it's been cool just, kind of watching our friendship grow along with it.
It's just a matter of you have to figure out that chemistry, and once you got that chemistry, everything's going to work perfectly.
Yeah. And I really think it has. And I mean, even with the, with all the numbers that we've got, the amount of people who have shown out to watch the shows, not even just counting the live streams, but even like our pay-per-view reviews always get a pretty solid number. We get guys, we get a lot of viewership now, and you're a big part of why, because as soon as you show up, all of these things take off. I'm not going to sit here and say that is not relevant because you can't argue with the numbers.
I know. It's one of those things where I enjoy doing this. I enjoy being a part of this. And it's something that we all can share around the world.
It's true. It's true. And that's not just because Titus O'Neil is the ACBW heavyweight champion worldwide. But it's also because, and kind of just to touch on ACBW and NWL, that more than anything, I mean, I love all the shows that we do, but there is no much more stressful week, but also no more fun week than the week that we do ACBW and NWL and get to really express our creative juices.
Because it's fun to be able to take these wrestlers that we see used poorly and use them the way they should be used.
Yeah. And, then that's, of course, you're going to get a little flavor of that for season 3 next week. But, you look back at all the stories that we've told, all the people that we've examined. Like, what are some of your favorite moments of the first 100 episodes of the Court-Martail podcast?
Personally, I just enjoy doing the pay-per-view reviews. They're probably my favorites.
The pay-per-view reviews are always fun because there's always some kind of joke or knock that we always make against something. But it's also nice when we both can, like, agree that a match was really fun and talk about the high points and low points of a show, because I think it engages some really interesting dialogue.
True. And it's one of those things where I enjoy the art form of wrestling. I enjoy the athletic form of wrestling. And it's good when we get a good match. It sucks when we get a bad match, but there's still something to be taken from it.
Absolutely. And also, I think that it helps all of our perspectives on professional wrestling when you've got somebody else there to bounce ideas with. It's very easy to get caught up in your own narrative of what you see in professional wrestling. But there have been a lot of times, Sky, that we'll do a match of the week or something, and you'll bring up a point, and I'm like, well, I can't really dispute that. That this is something I wouldn't normally like, but because of the way that you've presented it, I now have a better understanding for maybe why it happened or what good can be taken from it. And that's the core of this. It's like wrestling is so subjective. And it's nice to be able to share opinions so that we all grow in our perspective of what professional wrestling is and how it works for all of us.
And we'll continue to develop because the saying, you never say never with wrestling.
That's right. And now that we've got 100 episodes, that means we've got at least another 100 more, and then we can have this conversation and see what's changed.
For better or worse.
For better or worse.
Didn't get worse.
Yeah, well, we've gotten plenty of worse. But this actually brings up kind of our second topic in an interesting way, because as generations move on and as time passes, a lot of times people, especially those in power in the professional wrestling business, often want to get their sons or their daughters involved in pro wrestling, or, as is most of the time, the sons or daughters want to get involved with Ma and Pop's wrestling. So our topic today is multi-generational talents and entities in the business. So
I think the whole thing is that wrestling is a family business, and because it's a family business, it kind of is like, you know what? I need to save costs, get my family involved. It's just like anything in wrestling.
Well, but it also has its hits and its misses, like most everything in wrestling. And, we'll get to our the big guy that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So we've already mentioned Shane. We'll save him for the end. But I want to bring up a couple people who, maybe made it work and some who maybe didn't make it work. You know, Greg Gagne is a guy who kind of worked, but it wasn't, he would never reach the popularity of Vern, and that could have been in large part to just the pressure of being the son of the guy who's really over. That is a very hard ladder to climb. Ask anyone who's had a parent in the business.
And that's kind of the thing, is that you have the expectations that you have to fulfill.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to fulfill those expectations when you are the son of a legend or the daughter of a legend.
Yeah. And, you know, people like Randy Orton broke out and made themselves a name. Same thing with The Rock. You know, came out and made himself a absolute star. You know, and some people have been able to do it. Some people others are Eric Watts.
or like Bruno Sammartino and his son.
Oh, Dave Sammartino, who wrestled at the first WrestleMania. Just a fun fact, Dave Sammartino, yes, and that was why Bruno was there for the first WrestleMania. Otherwise, he probably would not have been.
Oh yeah.
And so, but you know, it's a thing like the Hearts, all of the Hearts. You know, it's really only in later years, you know, it's kind of a mixed bag with Hearts, you know, because you got some that are fine and some that are not so fine, and then you've got Brett and Owen.
It's just one of those things where it's not, just because you have a family tie doesn't mean that you're going to succeed. Right. I mean, for example, Curtis Axel.
Yeah, you know, I feel bad for Kurt. I think that he got stymied by a lot of stupid BS when he arrived. I mean, when he arrived, he was working with Triple H. And that was probably long before he was ready, but those matches weren't terrible. But then he gets into, you know, Rybaxel. And they tried too hard with him, I think was a big part of the problem. But still, at the end of the day, you're looking at it and you're like, well, that wasn't really a success, was it?
No. It's just one of those things where it kind of depends on the gimmick, too. Like, if you have a second-generation wrestler gimmick, it can work or it can't work. It just depends. Like, for example, with Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase with Randy Orton as Legacy.
Yep. And that did work. I mean, that as a gimmick. And, you know, to be fair, they beat DX in I think, what was it? The first tag Hell in a Cell, right?
Right, and they were good flunkies for Randy Orton.
Yep. But Ted Jr. also, again, was not his father. And I think that's one of the hardest things because you will always get comparisons. You know, I hate to bring up Grizzly Smith and Jake Roberts, but that was something that Jake Roberts became Jake Roberts in large part because he had to break free from Grizzly and his reputation. For good or ill, you know, because Jake obviously carried a lot with being the son of Grizzly Smith. Don't get me wrong. But part of the reason I think why Jake was so damn successful was that pressure that was put on him and how he was so defiant in counteracting that pressure.
Exactly. And it's one of those things where the pressure can get to you, but sometimes the pressure can turn into a diamond, like Randy Orton.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of pressure early on for Randy.
Totally.
But he was able to carry it.
Yeah. And carry it. And he was also surrounded with the people who knew how to cater to his strengths. You know, this was at a time when everyone was yelling at Triple H because he was part of the booking and the Reign of Terror and blah, blah, blah. But if he doesn't go and look at Randy Orton and say, this guy needs to be protected for the way that he is going to become a star and he can be a star, Randy Orton would falter if he broke in today. Realistically, Randy Orton does not get over if he broke in today.
Oh, no, for sure, for sure.
You know, it takes the right guidance, too, you know? And I think that's part of, like, I'm going to go back to The Rock. When The Rock debuted as the son of Rocky Johnson, and everyone's like, oh, even the first words out of JR's mouth were, this is a blue chip athlete right here. You know, a guy who had a chip on his shoulder, and the fans rejected the shit out of it. They hated it. As the fact that he was, so, you know, the first third generational talent, as they were touting it. And that did nothing for him until he, you know, that's what led to Die Rocky Die. So it's all about presentation.
It's one of those things where again, the gimmick can either succeed or not succeed, and as you saw, it almost takes a change from doing what your father or mother was doing and doing something completely else in order to succeed.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, as much success as she's gotten, look how much it's done to the reputation of Charlotte Flair, basically just being Rick but a female. Exactly. You wouldn't have that opinion if she had done something different. But she's been female Rick for 10 years. Or however long. How long have we had? It felt like 10 years. When did she debut? 2017? So it's only been like 6 or 7.
Well, hold on. How long has she been wrestling? No, she was there for the Divas title. She was the last Divas champion. That at least was 2014.
No, wasn't that 2016? The whole Team Bad thing? And that whole Stephanie McMahon invented women's wrestling?
Well, okay, maybe that was 2016, but
she had been wrestling in NXT for 2014 and 2015, but even then it wasn't so dramatically I'm Ric Flair as it was when she really debuted.
Okay, the revolution happened, if we're going to call it that, on July 13, 2015.
Okay, so it really has been almost a decade. Dear God.
Again, time passes when you're watching shitty wrestling.
I know. But the point stands. You know, it all depends on what you're given and whether you decide to make something new out of it. And realistically speaking, a lot of the people who have been hampered by lineage have been because they have been trying to honor it. Like the Usos. The Usos didn't get over, really, they didn't get over until the Uso Penitentiary.
Right, like they were the Usos originally with face paint, and they did okay, but they weren't characters. They were just caricatures.
Yep.
They were like, oh, another Samoan tag team with face paint.
Yep.
We've seen that before. And then they became the Usos. They became these gangster-like guys. They didn't care about you. They just wanted to win the championships.
And that worked.
It worked. It was not much of a character, but it was a character, and it worked.
Yeah. And, you know, it's something like... It's interesting, too, because, like, you look at somebody like Pillman Jr. now, you know, I wish he had had more guidance in AEW. I wish more people were taking care of him in AEW. But the fact that people really like Brian Pillman Jr. is probably because he's fiery, but he's not, like, going out and trying to be the loose cannon.
He's doing his own version of the loose cannon, which is different than what most people do.
Right. And he's being him. He's not trying to be his dad. And that's I think that's also part of the big problem there, too. It's like, in all credit, you know, and I know we're missing people here, because being in this business and having a son or daughter involved that just didn't pan out, like George Goulas, you know, that is...
Oh, boy, did that not pan out.
Oh, boy, did that not pan out. You know, but then you have that, but then you have the Von Erichs, right? You got 4 kids. You know, that's one of the weirdest anomalies, where you got all 4 kids, and all 4 kids except Mikey, poor Mikey, all 4 kids get over, you know, in their own way, but they all get over. That's like such a rare instance. And then, you know,
but then the Von Erichs had their tragedies, which,
oof. Yeah. So, but that's not really respective of like what we're talking about here. That's just circumstantial.
But that's also kind of the weights that a second generation or third generation wrestler can feel, because all of them, as good as they all are, they were still kind of in the shadow of Fritz.
That's true. No, I can't dispute that. No, that's definitely true. And you know, that I can only imagine how much that took out of Fritz to know that, because I'm sure that he knew that a lot of why they were the way they were was his pressure. No, not really. But, you know, I don't know the man. I didn't know the man. I can't, you know, say one way or another. But you know, it all depends on how you go about it, how you present it. The thing is, all the sons of the Von Erichs were touted to be, you know, these really upstanding guys, and that's what got over, the good old Von Erich boys. You know, and everybody gravitated to that, because, again, it's all about presentation. You know, if they came out looking like the Spirit Squad, nobody was going to give a damn about the Von Erichs.
God, they were not going to care.
You know, exactly. So part of it's presentation, but there's also a lot of external factors as to whether somebody succeeds. And you can ask Dustin Rhodes. Dustin dealt with a lot of demons, a lot of that just by proxy of being Dusty's kid.
Oh, yeah, and then the weird stuff that happened with Cody, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, and all of that, you know, that, and I would argue that Cody is still really under the shadow of Dusty. At least he acts like that. He acts that insecure like that.
I mean, I'm not the one with a neck tattoo of America.
Exactly. You know, the American dream, he's calling himself. The American nightmare, you know, all of that. And you could say, oh, he's using it as a gimmick, but I'm like, no, I genuinely don't think Cody's smart enough to just use it as a gimmick. I genuinely don't.
Oh, no.
I genuinely think that a lot of that stuff that he's doing out there, he genuinely believes. Otherwise, he wouldn't be doing this, you know, placenta reality show and the game show that nobody watches. And
he wouldn't be trying to be a star, just like his dad, but in every other way but wrestling.
Well, if he was like his dad, he wouldn't be trying to be a star. He'd just be a star. But Cody's trying to be a star because his dad was a star without trying.
And that's also kind of the thing about second and third generation wrestlers, is that they have to live up to that stardom, and they always try to succeed, and they put so much pressure on themselves.
Yeah.
But if they just went out there and did their thing, they probably would be fine.
Which is something I'll give Shane credit for. Because Shane, while he was very overtly Vince's son, he did a lot of stuff that was way outside the box to get himself distinguished from Vince McMahon. And that's something that I think is what really got him over, especially as he started getting into those matches where he'd take those death-defying risks. And we're going to talk about Shane's gimmick here in just a second. But that's something that Shane, I think, really succeeded in, where other generational talent could not. That Shane knew that he couldn't just be Vince Jr. if he wanted to have the kind of success that he ended up having.
Right, he had to do things different. And that's kind of the way that Shane has always been, is that he's always been different from everybody else.
Yeah. And it's separated himself, but then there was a limit to that. There are a lot of limits to that.
Well, we can talk about those limits because we saw them in 3 different matches.
That's right. And that's right, folks. 3 different matches. It's our 100th episode. We're giving you the mother load. Roll that intro.
What time is it?
It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the baby face cheered and the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
That's right, folks. It is time for the matches of the week. Trust me, we're not going to just do that for every match. We're not going to put the intro in at the start of every match. That's the one time you hear it. Now we've got a gauntlet. It is Shane-O-Mania. Are you ready, Skylar?
No.
For Shane-O-Mania.
Call it a Shane-O-Mania.
That's the title of our 100th episode. It is Shane-O-Mania. And we begin because we chose 3, because Shane McMahon has been wrestling for quite some time. He's been a part of 4 now, right? 3 different decades. Now we've got 4.
90s,
4 decades.
2000s, 10s, 20s,
and 20s.
4 decades.
So 4 decades, although not 40 years, just 4 decades, 30 some odd. We start with King of the Ring 1999. It is the tag team of Vince and Shane McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin for 100% ownership of the WWE on the line after Linda screwed Vince and Shane and made Stone Cold Steve Austin the owner or co-owner of 50% of the market share. And then Steve Austin raised hell at Titan Towers, and Vince and Shane want their baby back.
Well, do you know why Linda was mad at Vince and Shane?
Was this when Vince was making Trish walk around like a dog, or was this the time when they were putting her in the comatose state? No, that was later.
Has nothing to do,
later.
It has nothing to do with Trish.
Remind me.
It has to deal with the corporate ministry kidnapping Stephanie McMahon.
Right. Forgot about
and Vince
that.
revealing himself as the higher power.
Yes. crucifixion, which was supposed to be Christopher Daniels originally, but ended up not being. And probably for a good reason.
Well, it saved his career.
Yeah. Realistically, that probably would have made Christopher Daniels DOA.
But yeah, Linda decided that, you know what, you two were involved with Stephanie's kidnapping, so I'm resigning, but before I resign, I'm giving Stone Cold my position, and this gave him 50% of WWF, and Austin booked this match for 100% ownership because he wanted Vince and Shane's parts.
That's right. So, now part of the story going into this was that Vince McMahon could come up with a suitable replacement because Shane said that his neck was bad. So
yeah, because he got attacked by, well, hold on.
Theoretically.
This is a weird show because this had 15 matches on it. Some of them were aired as Heat episodes.
Yeah, and it was, and because they only go like 4 minutes a pop.
Right.
You know.
One of the matches was Ken Shamrock, who was feuding with Vince at this time, wrestling against Shane and breaking his neck supposedly in a 40-second match on the pre-show or something.
And that's when Shane's
aired.
like, "Oh, my neck hurts. I can't do these."
Yep.
And so they were going to find a suitable replacement. So Vince comes out, and out comes Steve Blackman, who is a corporate stooge. And Steve Blackman, I would love to do more of a discussion into Steve Blackman because he's one of the most fascinating Attitude Era wrestlers who came in and got out before he got any on him. And he is such an interesting guy, an interesting wrestling career. And the way that he worked, you know, at some point we're going to have to take a bigger look into Steve Blackman. But in any case, then we get the FTV footage of Shane McMahon hanging around with the Mean Street Posse. And then Pete Gas is like, "Dude, you're on TV." And Shane's like, uh-oh. And
which they never explained how he ended up being on TV.
Nope, they just, Attitude Era. Didn't matter, Attitude Era. Everybody's over. You don't need to worry about that kind of thing when everybody's over. But Shane McMahon tries to leave with the Mean Street Posse, and here comes Commissioner Bilbo Baggins. And he's like, "Oh, no, you don't do this, not today. I'm going to bring you. It looks like you're done there next. Fine. So I'm going to go."
No. That's not Shawn Michaels.
No, it's Bilbo Baggins. Although he didn't look nearly as incapacitated as he did during the match with Triple H and The Rock.
No. That was worse.
That was bad. He wasn't that bad this time around. That one was bad. This one was not bad. But then he brings out Shane, and I loved the set of this pay-per-view. With all the ladders there for this ladder match, that is how you incorporate 10 or 12 ladders into a wrestling match, not just having people just huck them around everywhere.
Well, that was only set up for this match specifically, I think. I don't remember King of the Ring 1999.
I believe it was up for the whole show, because the whole gimmick was the ladder match, I believe was the main event. I think. It was because of ownership of the company.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It is the main event.
Yeah, so I think it was out the whole time. And so then Blackman is told to leave, so he leaves, and Shane has to wrestle. And then there is nothing quite like a Stone Cold Steve Austin Attitude Era pop.
No, there isn't.
There is nothing quite like it. The crowd went absolutely ballistic. And then when Blackman leaves, I have to give credit to JR here. I loved hearing JR and King. King was on his best behavior, but he had some good one-liners. And one of the things that JR said when Blackman was released and in comes Shane McMahon, I don't know whether you caught this, JR goes, "My boy Blue won the pony."
Well, I didn't catch that, but that's a very good quote by JR.
Yeah, I was like, hey, I know that reference. For those of you who don't know that story, I will abridge it very quickly. In the 30s, there was this promoter called Bill Lewis, and one day he, in the town that they were in, decided he was going to raffle. He owned a farm, so he said, "We're going to raffle off a pony. So put your names in, put the $5 in, get your tickets. Middle of the show, we're going to raffle off a pony." Well, by the time they finally get out there, he gets into the ring, goes to show, and he goes, "All right, let's raffle off this pony." Pulls out the ticket, Well, wouldn't you know it? My son Blue won the pony, and everyone went, "You motherfucker," and it killed the whole town. And so anything that is known to be obviously contrived or set up, the phrase is, "Well, wouldn't you know who won the pony?" Cornette said this, and I was really surprised to see JR make this reference, but I do appreciate it.
Well, I'm sure that was a Jim Cornette, Jim Ross-ism that they came up with.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they knew. I mean, they both knew the story, and it's good to know that they're both historians. So it was just nice. It was nice having heard that and just to be like, I understand that reference.
Thank you, Captain America. Anyways.
It's really what it felt like. So then we get to the actual match part of this. What are your thoughts on this match?
This was an extended beatdown. Like,
yes,
it was an extended beatdown, and it just it went forever.
Yeah, but and the thing was, the crowd I thought was kind of like coming in and out in waves, especially as it started to go a little bit long. But the big part, the takeaway I had from this match is when you're over, it doesn't really matter.
Yes, but again, watching it back with a fine-tuned eye, you can see where the holes were in this. Well,
sure. It's an Attitude Era ladder match. For sure, there's going to be gaps in it. I did notice that Shane hits the ring ropes great. And he always took to the ring, the in-ring part of wrestling, far better than his dad did.
Well, it helped that he was younger when he was doing this. And also he has that training that, supposedly training.
He has more training.
We'll get to in a minute.
Yeah. But, there were certain things that Shane does that look great. It's just certain things. It's just not everything. But at this point, the gimmick of Shane is that he's not a wrestler. He can do moves. He can take a beating. Very clearly, he can take a beating. But he's not a wrestler. And there's no gimmicking that he is a wrestler. And that's fine, because that makes it more viable that Austin just goes and opens up a can of whoop-ass on Vince and Shane for the first 10 minutes of this match.
Which is kind of all it was, which, again, I like that we were able to see this because, again, it's always the way that Stone Cold Steve Austin got pops, and also the reason that WCW failed because Eric Bischoff didn't get beat up enough.
Yeah.
In real life, too.
One of the reasons. But yeah, I mean, I love. And then Lawler had a great line that cracked me up as they're getting ready to do this big ladder spot. And
hold on. We're not there yet.
Oh, you have more to talk about, like Shane's crappy clothesline.
No. We'll get to that in a second. We have Stone Cold Steve Austin grab Shane McMahon, and he's about to pull both legs into the ring post. He does it, and then Jim Ross says, "Well, there's not going to be a fourth generation of McMahons." Well,
little did we know.
And then Jerry Lawler says, "There's always Stephanie."
Well, even though she was just kidnapped by the Ministry of Darkness and crucified, basically, or nearly crucified.
Nearly crucified.
Didn't actually go through with it, otherwise Kurt Angle would never have signed. That's a reference for you kids out there.
Right. And then Shane McMahon's shitty clothesline from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, the bait was good, the setup was good, the execution was not. And Austin didn't know how to sell for it either. That's how bad the clothesline was.
Austin sold it just by falling down.
But it was like you hear he hit it, and then Austin's like, "Oh snap!" and then falls down shortly thereafter. But then the beatdown continues, and now they're going over to the big ladder structure, which is a really cool setup. I thought the whole thing was very cleverly set up, and throws Vince into one of the ladders, and then Austin picks Vince up and flips him off. And throws him into another ladder, and Jerry Lawler says, "Next time you wave at him, use all your fingers."
Oh, that was amazing.
I was like, "That's."
What was Shane McMahon doing climbing up the ladders?
Oh, he was trying to get away from Austin, but it was just not a very well thought out plan.
Again, this is one of those things in this type of matches with the Attitude Era where the logic sometimes kind of goes away.
But everybody at this point, the fans just didn't care. That was the thing, is like, it's one thing when everybody's over, you can bend the logical rules a little bit, but when nobody's over, you have to be on it. And that's a big discrepancy here, because there's some things you can kind of give and take when you're over, but when you're not, people are going to be focusing on those hyper details. So
exactly.
So Austin,
another thing. Well, hold on, continue.
No, continue.
Shane and Austin and Vince, credit to them. Austin threw them into the ladders hard.
Oh yeah,
every time he was yeeting him into those ladders.
Yes, all the yeets. There was a lot of yeets. And then I loved the thing, even though that chain was kind of like, where the hell did this chain come from? But you could kind of argue that it was just the setup. He knocked all the ladders down so the chain fell, because that's how they were keeping all the ladders up. So you can get it, but I loved this yank the set and just collapse all the ladders onto them. That was genius. And one of the coolest ladder spots I've seen in a long time.
Exactly. Like, it was amazing watching the ladders fall down. And it didn't look that dangerous. It looked dangerous, but it didn't look like it was going to kill anybody.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely, like, it was super cool. But it also looked like it was damaging, and then they both crawl out. And then, did you notice, as they're getting back into the ring, JR, they go into a picture-in-picture, right, to show, I believe to show the cage breaking, right? And show the ladders breaking.
Austin throwing the McMahons into the different ladders,
right,
and finally the big pull down.
But they go into the picture-in-picture, and then action starts picking back up in real time, and JR, ever the expert, goes, well, folks, if you look at the right of your screen, back in action here, Austin, and he immediately made sure to direct the people's attention back to where the action counted. And that is the genius that is JR, and how expert a broadcaster JR truly was in his prime. Because you don't get that nowadays. You just get Kevin Dunn missing shit.
Right, and unfortunately, as much as I love Jim Ross, he's aged so much that he doesn't catch those things as much in AEW.
No, unfortunately, he's still calling Bryan Danielson Daniel Bryan.
Well, aren't we all?
Well, it's true. It's hard to unlearn habits sometimes. But then, we get to the announce table spots.
Well, specifically the Spanish announce table.
Right, with Hugo, and I kind of thought that was kind of a weak announce table spot, because it didn't really look like Austin hit Shane, it just kind of looked like the table just combusted.
Yeah, Austin should have gone up a little bit higher.
Yeah, or just aimed that better. But then we get the second table spot, which is where Vince pushes Austin off the ladder onto the table, and the table doesn't break. And that was one of the few instances that I thought a non-breaking table actually really helped the story. Because it made it look like he thwammed onto that table and slid off.
Well, it looked like it hurt more.
Yeah. Yeah, it looked painful.
Right, and Austin was selling it, and he was doing a very good job of selling it.
Yeah. And then we get this weird, like, I think they were trying to do McMahon is on the top of the ladder, and Austin goes up, and he looks like he's gonna, like, suplex Vince, but then he realizes he doesn't have enough space to suplex him, like, based on where the ladder is, so he just kind of, like, tosses him to the side. Instead, it was supposed to be a suplex, they were lining up for a suplex, and then it just turned into, like, almost like a body slam, but it wasn't even, it was like Vince just fell off the ladder.
Well, it was Austin helping get Vince off the ladder.
Yeah, but I have to imagine that was kind of a botch, though.
Well, it was a little bit of a botch, but it was also Austin kind of doing something on the fly. Like, this isn't going to work, I'm going to try something else.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it still worked in the context of the match of, it's a ladder match, you don't want him climbing up the ladder, get him down by any means.
Right, fair play to it. It's just it was just definitely not what they intended to go for, but they made the best of it. I liked the whole Vince and Shane trying to get to the belt without using the ladder. I thought that was good. Well, here's why I liked it. That's the kind of comedy that's fine in pro wrestling, because it's them still trying to win the match and them just failing. That's fine. Ha ha ha! You failed. You make an ass out of yourself because you're trying to use it without a ladder. I couldn't hate that at all, because that's the kind of physical comedy that is much more pertinent to wrestling than some of the crap that they hoist on people now.
It helps that the face of Vince, as he's doing it, he looks so stupid and he looks like a dope.
Well, Vince has always had funny facials. He's always had funny facials. We'll get to his facial expressions and how maybe too frequently we saw them in the second match. But
right. The other thing, too, though, Austin never went for the stunner.
Until later. He did hit 2 stunners. And then he went for the ladder, and then because that was the finish, and then we have the mystery man who raised up the briefcase.
Which, do you know who it was revealed to be? Because I don't.
They never did. They never did. That's one of the long-standing mysteries of WWE is who raised up that briefcase at WrestleMania at King of the Ring. Nobody knows. It was supposed to be, allegedly, it was speculated that it was Big Boss Man because Boss Man was part of the corporation and Austin had beaten Boss Man earlier. I think maybe even that night, but it might have been the night, the Raw before.
It was the Raw before to make sure that there was no corporate ministry interference.
Yeah. So then that was the whole concept was that it was Boss Man who had gotten into the production truck. But that was never explained. That was never revealed. That was never discussed. On air, that was never revealed. So nobody knows. To this day, we will never find out who raised up that briefcase.
For all we know, it could have been Vince Dunn. Kevin Dunn.
Oh, no. Why'd you do this again, Sky? Oh, no. Oh, Vince Dunn, book it. Anyway, so...
Talk about a person that needs to get a couple stunners.
Yeah. Well, overall, what's your takeaway from this match before you move on to the second?
Again, these matches are not my kind of thing because I like actually seeing professional wrestling in athletic contests, and this kind of felt a little bit too hardcore garbage. But it's the McMahons versus Austin. It's classic. You're always going to enjoy it, but whatever.
Yeah, flavor of the time.
Flavor of the time.
Definitely
it does
flavor
not
of the
age
time.
well. Trust me.
As with most Attitude Era things, it doesn't age well. But my counterpoint is that everybody's over, so people really didn't care that much. And the other thing about this too is like compared to some of the other garbage wrestling that they put on, this wasn't that bad. This was pretty tame compared to some of the garbage wrestling hardcore matches that they were putting on at this era.
By the way, there's one more thing that we forgot to mention that gave me a laugh. If you watch the end of this match as Shane McMahon is trying to run away from Austin, you'll notice that Shane's shirt is peeling and the McMahon is falling off.
I saw that. And it got worse and worse as the match progressed. And I did notice that. That was really funny. But I will say this, though. Shane, everybody here behaved the way that their gimmicks should have. And keep this in mind. Shane was not a wrestler, but he was willing to do some crazy stuff in order to give the McMahons the advantage here. But there was no acknowledgement or no trying to make up for the fact or prove that he was as much of a professional wrestler as the professional wrestlers. That wasn't Shane's role here. And Shane did a great job not doing that. Keep that in mind as we move on to match 2, which is another hardcore match, no disqualifications. Shane McMahon versus Shawn Michaels from Saturday Night Main Event on March 18th, 2006. Roughly 3 or 4 weeks out from a WrestleMania where Shawn Michaels wrestled Vince McMahon.
And this was part of the Vince McMahon versus Shawn Michaels feud?
Yes, this was a build-up, which the finish of this match very clearly indicated. What were your thoughts on match number 2?
I think this was the better hardcore match. Well, it was better than the ladder match because actually Shane got some moves in and it felt more even. And Shane had definitely been more experienced by this point because when he was doing his thing in 1999, you could tell he was a baby.
Yeah, I mean, well, his big claim to fame in '99 was that big scaffold drop at SummerSlam with Test. That was Shane's big thing in 1999, and what we saw was a month before that. So Shane, this really was Shane just getting his sea legs about him.
Right, but this is a more experienced Shane McMahon, and he did good, even if it was ironic how he's still in the shadow of his father.
I think it worked because that was his whole gimmick there, and of course that led into his whole 2006 feud with DX, and got that whole thing turned around. And Shane in 06 definitely was a much better worker, but I still don't think that he was trying to full-fledged he wasn't trying to be the best of the very best. He wasn't trying to prove to everybody that he was the best wrestler in the world. He wasn't trying to prove that he was the best wrestler. He just knew he could beat Shawn. It was different. His gimmick was different because it was, I can beat Shawn Michaels. I'm going to beat him down, but am I a full-fledged pro wrestler out here every week? No, I'm not. And I'm not planning to be because I'm the son of the boss and I don't have to be. Right? And that's Shane's gimmick, right? That's the whole thing, is like he was spoon-fed everything, knows enough to wrestle and beat people, but knows he has tons of advantages outside of his wrestling ability that he can rely on. That's what made Shane such a good heel. And this match was definitely a little bit better, and I think because Shawn structured it. But that is also my biggest critique of this match. This felt like a Shawn Michaels match.
Because
I've seen it.
It's all of Shawn Michaels' hallmarks.
And it's also Shawn Michaels graduated the Ric Flair school of let's do every move that we do, which is our set, in the exact same order, in the exact same way, at the exact same time in every single match we do. And don't get me wrong, it works, but when you look at it, with those sharpened eyes, like you say, you're like, okay, it's a Shawn Michaels match. And there got to a point where I was like, okay, I kind of know what the rest is coming. So I lost interest in this about halfway because of that, because of a very typical Shawn Michaels finish.
Although it had the McMahons involved, so for the first half of it, it felt like a McMahon's kind of match.
Yes.
Specifically with Shane, because there's a lot of Vince interfering, and there's a lot of Shane doing stupid stuff, like that superplex from the ladder to the ring into the two tables.
Well, Shawn did that. Shawn did that on Shane, but actually, that was my favorite spot of the match, because that looked devastating. And then they had to cut through a break to go through that. I'm like, what a perfect break spot.
Right. Also, the way they cut those tables, they shattered when they fell apart.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And this was something I noticed about Shane McMahon. Shane did more like actual strongman lifting moves in 2006 than he did the rest of his career. Like, I remember he lifted up Shawn Michaels 3 or 4 times in the Hell in a Cell match that they had with DX and the Big Show. Shane McMahon got Triple H up for a Superstar Billy Graham backbreaker. Like,
well, you have to remember that this is Shane probably at his physical prime because he's 35.
True.
Like, when we saw Shane back in 99, he was 29, 28.
And still very green.
And still very green. This is probably the best that Shane McMahon could do as physical prime and his mental prime.
Yeah. And then Shawn, of course, selling everything to the nth degree. Did you notice how crazy oversold that sell of him getting hoisted into the ring post was?
It was giving me Shawn Michaels Hogan level of selling.
He literally helicoptered like Elway at that playoff game in the NFL. He went all the way around the ring post and flew down. It was so ridiculous. But that's Shawn Michaels. He's the only person who could get away with that kind of thing.
Well, he is the human ragdoll.
That's right. And then Vince McMahon gets a kendo stick, and I'm just over kendo sticks in general, so I was like, all right, fine. But he gets some big side shots to Shawn. Shawn's going up for the elbow, and then it leads to Shane taking over, ladder shots, and then, of course, because this is YouTube and WWE, they censored what I have now come to call the laddering ram, which is when you use the ladder and you turn it into a battering ram and use it on somebody's head.
Because headshots are not allowed.
That's right. And Shawn, the thing about Shawn is that he sells pain, being in pain, like when he had that double arm wrench. Shawn sells pain very, very, very well. Better than most.
Especially when Shane was hitting Shawn Michaels' back with the ladder.
Yeah. Yeah, Shawn sells pain, particularly his facials. It reminds me a little bit of Ricky Morton. He's not as good as Ricky Morton, because Ricky Morton could make the oldest biker cry if he looked at him while his face was bloody and he was selling like death. You know, Ricky Morton could get that out of anybody. Shawn was very, very good. He wasn't as good as Ricky Morton, but he was still very, very good at that.
By the way, my favorite Vince McMahon expression was Shane hitting Shawn Michaels in the back, and Vince McMahon on the outside starts dancing around, going, my back, and doing a Shawn strut.
Oh, yeah. Vince McMahon in 2006 was maybe at his, like, heel comedy peak. You know, he was doing some of the most... He was funny, but he was funny in a way that you wanted to hate him. You wanted to slug him. It was... Vince McMahon in 2006 was a good year for Vince and Shane. I really do think, as far as what they were able to do, the kind of presentation that they were giving themselves, how they were portraying themselves. I will say, though, I thought that Kevin Dunn cut to Vince just a little bit too much.
Again, and that's also part of the whole Shane is Vince's son thing.
Right.
Because the story really was about Vince versus Shawn, and Vince wanting to see Shawn get hurt.
Right, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't have gone to Vince. It just seemed like every time a move was done, you cut to Vince. Even if Vince didn't even have anything going on with him at the moment. You know, it was just something that Kevin Dunn has been notorious for doing for the past decade or so. You know, the cuts just got a little too fast for my tastes. Shane's float over DDT is always kind of spotty at best.
It's either looks good or bad. There's no in between.
You know what my favorite one that he's ever done was? It wasn't in any of the matches we saw. My favorite one he ever did was on top of the cell with Kevin Owens.
Oh, that was a good one.
That one looked... that match was actually... we should have chosen that match, because that is one of my favorite Shane McMahon matches of all time.
Although I wonder how it's aged.
I think it'd be pretty... I would think pretty well, considering the Sami Zayn swerve that I was not prepared for at the end of that. I don't know. We'll have to take a look at it, but not in anywhere near the recent future. We just went... We're still in the middle of Shane-O-Mania. And
Shane-O-Mania is going coast to coast.
That's right.
And hitting his father in the head with a trash can.
Which I thought was an incredibly clever out to that.
Even if they did that stupid cutaway.
Yeah.
Because no headshots.
Right. Well, again, but I got the point, and I was like, that's still a really clever spot. That's a really clever spot to have, because Vince is like tearing her for Shawn. I did really like that. Then
this is the part of the match where I kind of lost it, because this is Shawn Michaels doing his comeback, and I'm just like,
yep.
Okay, Shawn. Okay.
Yeah, get on with it. Yeah. Then it became a Shawn Michaels match. And, you know, we get the sweet chin music and the ref pull, which I called from a mile away. And then the screwjob finish, which was already kind of overdone, but it was before it was grossly overdone.
But, I mean, it's not the first time that Vince has done the screwjob thing.
No,
with Shawn Michaels, of all people.
No, he did it the year after the actual screwjob with The Rock and Mankind. You know, but for the purpose of building the match that they were going to have, I'm not going to dump on this, because, yes, it's a screwjob finish, but that was basically the point of what they were going for here. You know, because there was no referee. You know, it was just basically like, no, I'm going to do this just to screw him over, you know, and then lead to the match. I don't hate this, because this wasn't meant to be the end of a feud, the way that it was when they did it, or, you know, the way they did it in 98, which kind of worked. And it was also long before, who was it who did it to Natalya? I forget who. That was later on when they just started, like, doing it all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Pretty much once Brett came back and they were like, all right, now we don't have to feel guilty about it.
Now we're just going to do this whenever we feel like it.
Yeah. So, you know, it was before that, so that made it at least a little bit more palatable. But all in all, the first half of this was good, but this match was just okay. I think just because I'm so used to seeing Shawn Michaels be Shawn Michaels that it just took away from it.
Which, again, it's the whole, I love seeing Shawn, but Brett's not wrong about his matches being different compared to Shawn Michaels.
And, you know, I'm not going to say, you know, I think CM Punk kind of was correct when he said, you know, you look at Shawn's matches, you look at Brett's matches, and who's hold up better. Right now, I've been more into Brett's matches than I have Shawn's, and Shawn was one of my favorite wrestlers of all time when I was growing up.
And that's no knock on Shawn.
No,
it's just
not
that
at all.
His matches just feel samey.
Yeah, it's just Shawn Michaels' matches were formulaic, which is what WWE likes to do. Like I said, he graduated the Ric Flair school of do this exact same thing in the exact same way in the exact same match all the time formula. And to Shawn's credit, it worked to some degree. It definitely happened more frequently on his second run than it did with his first, because his first he was way too pilled up and he was just being unprofessional all the time. But it was, especially around this time, especially around 2005, 2006, it started really getting repetitive. And, you know, again, no knock on Shawn. It was just we'd seen it.
We've seen it, and we didn't have to see it, but we kept seeing it.
Yep. And now we get to I think the strangest one, I think probably you think is the best one, and that is the more modern era match of Shane McMahon versus AJ Styles at WrestleMania 33. And my last thought on this 06 match was at least Shane was still not trying to prove that he was a actual full-time professional wrestler who was competitive with full-time professional wrestlers. This is Shane McMahon trying to be a wrestler. And I think that is where the disconnect happened for me, because it goes against what Shane had built as a gimmick to begin with, which was that Shane could do the moves. He had shown he could do the moves and fight with them, but at the end of the day, he wasn't a wrestler, and he needed resources, and there were things that he needed. You know, he would give it his all in a lot of ways. He'd sacrifice his body for anything. But this Shane, this late in the game, especially as a babyface in this match, this Shane McMahon was trying to prove that he was AJ Styles. And it went against his gimmick, and I think that's part of the reason why people soured on him, especially when he won the Best in the World.
Okay, well, Best in the World Shane was different than this one.
True.
Let's get that out of the way right now.
Right,
okay?
I'm not disagreeing with that. But inevitably one led to the other.
Well, okay. You can't just say that on the whims. You just can't say that on the whims, because there were things that happened in between. But let's talk about the match. Let's talk about the match. It's Shane McMahon versus AJ Styles. And actually, Shawn, I think you are looking at this incorrectly. Because
Why is that?
You are not considering the feud that Shane McMahon and AJ Styles were having. Because, let me rewind the clock a little bit. When we go back to AJ Styles, he had just lost the WWE title to John Cena, and then at Royal Rumble. And he wanted the title back. And he felt like he was getting some unfair treatment from Shane McMahon, when Shane McMahon was just trying to give him opportunities and openly admit, I don't like you, AJ, but you're too talented to not have chances. So AJ kept failing, and he blamed Shane and put his head through a window of a car because he felt that Shane McMahon was screwing him over when Shane wasn't screwing him over. So Shane said, you know what? I was fine with holding my hands away from you, but I can't do it no more because you put your hands on me and you attacked me. We're going to wrestle at Mania, and I'm going to beat you at your own game. And in that context, I'm okay with this match.
I have no problem with the context of this match. I have the problem with Shane's moveset and style of this match.
No.
Because if Shane is an authority figure...
We can talk about that openly.
Right.
Because
that's the problem I have with this. Shane is trying to out-wrestle AJ Styles, and that's not Shane's gimmick. Shane should be out-wrestled by AJ Styles, definitively, and then have to use or have to rally from something, even though the whole story is that, oh, Shane's surprising people. He's doing better at the graps than AJ may have given him credit for. I get that. But this is not the person who should be going hold for hold with AJ Styles. You know, that's not... Shane has to be doing the death-defying crazy stuff like the Shooting Star. That I had no problem with. That's fine, going that deep into it. But he shouldn't be going hold for hold with AJ Styles. That I don't think does more of disservice to AJ than anything else, because then it makes it look like, oh, this guy who's... Yeah, he's had wrestling matches, and yeah, he's had some good ones, but he should not be wrestling like Kurt Angle.
Well, I don't think Shane McMahon was wrestling like Kurt Angle. because he was wrestling like Shane McMahon. Because Shane is a decent wrestler, but he's not a traditional wrestler, so he's more unorthodox. He does things differently than traditional wrestlers, and that's the story of the match, is that AJ Styles had an unpredictable opponent because Shane is different in the way he does things than a typical wrestler would do.
Well, I would agree with you if they didn't do headlock, arm drag, leap round, drop down, leapfrog, get him again. And then Shane started actually doing like the bringing the legs down and doing the leg sweep and rolling around and getting the headlock. He was doing angle movesets to start this match. They were chain wrestling. Shane McMahon, gimmick-wise, not to say he can't do it, not to say it doesn't look decent when he does it, but Shane McMahon should not be chain wrestling AJ Styles.
Well, if he was a heel, then I would agree with you. But because he's a babyface, he can. Because he does have that training. He does have that experience. Maybe it's not perfect. I mean, we can talk about some of the execution of Shane's moves in a little bit.
Well, and that was also part of the problem, is that everything that he did that was wrestling was so sloppy because he was trying to work a modern wrestling speed that he really couldn't match.
Right. I mean, AJ had to be calling this match because Shane would not be able to have this match without AJ.
Yeah, which is why it would make more sense for Shane not to do all of the grappling, because he couldn't match that pace. If AJ was going that fast and then it was visibly shown that Shane couldn't keep up with that, and then AJ gets on top of him, and then Shane can make the comeback, surprise us with some wrestling in the middle of the match rather than out-wrestling AJ at the outset. Maybe it's just bad formatting. Maybe I'm just thinking that the layout of this match just didn't appeal to me. Because if Shane does wrestling afterwards, after AJ has been out-wrestling him this whole time, then AJ can get surprised at the fact that Shane McMahon is out-wrestling AJ because Shane McMahon's got a fire lit underneath him. But instead, this was tit for tat. I don't mean to cut you off repeatedly, but this was tit for tat, and AJ shouldn't be wrestling a tit for tat match with Shane McMahon.
I understand your criticism of the formatting of this match, and I think that's the part that you're hung up on. And I think it's different because you and me have different mindsets of what we want in our wrestling
For sure,
matches.
yeah. I'm not saying you're wrong with any of the things you're presenting, because you're totally making the case. You know, I think both of these can be correct. Both opinions can have weight.
But can we just appreciate the fact that Shane and AJ did a collar and elbow tie-up?
I will always appreciate the fact that a collar and elbow tie-up is done. I will.
Not only that, but they did two of them.
Yeah, no, that I'm, again, cool with that. Cool with that. It's just the formatting. And there was one glaring problem I had with this match. The commentary team of Tom Phillips, JBL, and the man who I didn't even remember his goddamn name until I had to look it up on Google, David Otunga.
Oh, they were terrible all match.
Why was David Otunga there? He said 4 words. Why was he there?
His husband?
It's, oh man, he's like, oh, he's gonna get him. He didn't. Oh, he's got him now. And that was it. That was literally it. And I said it with more passion than David Otunga did. I don't know why he was there. There was no need for him to be there. And I noticed this though. Shane's shadow boxing punches came later in his career when he was trying to act again more like I'm on par with the wrestlers, which was this whole gimmick that Shane decided to do. And this was the start of it, really, because he showed that, hey, Shane McMahon can be at the same level as AJ Styles. Maybe that's just my problem of what this whole represented. It's not necessarily even the match itself, but it's what Shane McMahon's gimmick became after this match that became my glaring problem. Because then all of a sudden Shane is now like, I'm as much of a wrestler as the wrestlers. And then started, doing that and then doing the, oh, look at me, I'm training in my boxing thing. And look at all these crappy punches I'm laying, like I know how to box, which you don't. And
well, again, that was part of the Shane McMahon heel character. You can appreciate the heel character and boo him at a certain point, but when it becomes unbelievable, it's,
Right. And, it's one thing for him to do the jabs and he's doing the dancing and all that. That is Shane McMahon. That's not what I'm talking about here. But the shadow box, the punches we saw him give to Riddle at the Rumble.
Well, okay. We're not even going to get into this because we still have a match to review and we barely talked about it.
Right, but that's what I'm akinning this to. What that became, that was definitely a later career Shane McMahon than it was an early career Shane McMahon. Ty Dillinger is still over at this point.
Okay, whatever, chairman.
Well, you heard it every time the referee counted. 10.
No.
10.
Ty Dillinger was not over. The fans just wanted to cheer a stupid gimmick. Can we move on?
I guess I can't dispute that. I can't dispute that. Because Shawn Spears really, he had his shot. He had one good match with Cody and has done absolutely nothing since.
No, hold on. Let's talk about this match, actually, please. Thank you. AJ Styles.
This was part of the match because it was just as, the fans were just as into this or as a part of this as anything else, and the fans love to make it sound like they're a part of things, so.
Well, the fans are idiots. Anyways.
It's true.
AJ Styles does the basement dropkick, and Shane McMahon is the master of flying over the announce table, as we have seen with 3 matches.
Yep. Did it in all of them, which is a Shane McMahon spot. Yeah. Oh, that was another thing I had a problem with, too, is like you got every Shane McMahon spot known to man, too. And this was also kind of another thing. This was kind of formulaic Shane as far as the coast to coast, which I know I'm way skipping a whole bunch, but it's a shame we don't see the Ochi-Goroshi anymore.
I'd like to see the Ochi-Goroshi more.
I would, too. I really would, because it's a fun move. I mean, it's devastating, but it's a fun move.
Now, AJ Styles, I know we talk shit about Shane's punches, as we should, because his punches in this match were very inconsistent. He either hit AJ head on or missed him completely.
Yeah.
Every one of AJ's punches looked fantastic.
This was really peak AJ Styles in WWE, mid-2016 through mid-2017. Not even counting his title reign.
I mean, I would count 2015, too, when he won the title. Like, from 2015 to 2017, Styles was on fire.
Yeah. He was the guy, really, in a lot of ways in WWE, even if he wasn't full-fledged treated as the guy as far as, where his matches were positioned on the card, but
he was the face that runs the place.
Yeah, he was.
John Cena.
He was.
He beat Dean Ambrose. He beat all these guys on SmackDown. He was the face that ran SmackDown.
The only member of Impact to lap NXT entirely and to go straight to the main roster.
He was so over enough that he could get away with it.
Even though Kevin Dunn missed it.
Yeah.
As usual.
Kurt Angle, the Angle slam, I wonder if Kurt Angle had talks with Shane afterwards.
See, this is what I'm talking about. Shane was trying to wrestle like Kurt Angle here.
Because Shane got no elevation on it.
Yeah, no, it was bad. It was not good. And this was, and then Shane's awful knees in the corner that didn't look like they hurt. And this was part of my problem. He started acting like a wrestler and all of his stuff looked bad. You couldn't see that in the matches beforehand because granted they were no disqualification matches, but at the same time, you couldn't notice the flaws as badly as you could in this match.
Right, when AJ had him in the calf crusher and then Shane McMahon transitions that into the rear naked choke, into an armbar, and then into the omoplata. Every time I was watching, I'm just like, this was much better when I was watching it, but in hindsight, Shane shouldn't be doing this. And this was kind of the part of the match where, like, yeah, Shane should not be wrestling toe for toe with AJ like this.
Yeah. It would have been one, and again, it's all about placement. If they do this as a Shane McMahon comeback, that's fine. But then we get the refs the bump. And
hold on. AJ tries to go for a phenomenal forearm, and Shane McMahon turns it into a triangle.
I actually liked that spot. I thought that was kind of clever, but again, I had seen so much of Shane's garbage chain wrestling and trying to do submission holds that it just looked so out of place.
Right, and then AJ did the one-handed Styles Clash.
That was cool. I thought that was my favorite spot of the whole match. That was super cool. And then,
but then also, Shane should not have kicked out.
No. But of course, it's WrestleMania and it's Shane McMahon. And Shane McMahon has to be on par with the wrestlers. That's where this started. That's how this all started. And then, now we get the ref bump. Which
was a great ref bump because it didn't look like a ref bump.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But hashtag bad formatting. How long did these two have without a referee, even though the medical team was there checking on the referee and had 2 pair of eyes?
3 minutes.
Yeah, I think longer, maybe even longer than that.
No, 3 minutes. Exactly.
It was exactly 3 minutes, and no Rosie and Jamal to be found. And they have... they had the...
What a callback.
Yeah, that's a reference there for you kids. And it just... And the thing was, is Shane McMahon jumped over Kyoto to hit the coast to coast. And you're telling me Kyoto didn't even feel him there? Didn't even see him do it? Like, are you kidding me? And then the elbow drop on the announce table, which Shane missed after that. Kyoto was looking right at them. Justify that. At the part where Shane McMahon was actually being Shane McMahon, they stopped caring about the rules and they stopped caring about where Kyoto was.
No, Kyoto was back for that part.
No, that's right. I'm sorry. Kyoto did the cover, then the kick up by AJ, then Kyoto just turned around to heel and to recover so that he was looking at the entrance ramp so that Shane and AJ could do their shenanigans. My bad.
Like,
you're right.
How do you not see Shane McMahon literally throw a trash can?
Yeah.
You're literally 2 feet away. Why didn't the medical crew tell Kyoto that Shane McMahon used the trash can and then threw it away?
Yeah. Bad formatting. So then Shane, misses. AJ tries again. And I forget.
Again, it kind of buries Mike Kyoto,
yep.
Which I feel bad.
Which they always do. They love burying the referees. And then we get the highlight of Shane McMahon. He tried to do that shooting star press and he missed. So AJ lined up for the phenomenal forearm and that did it.
Well, I mean, he did the elbow. He tried to do the elbow drop first, which he missed. So why did he try to go for the shooting star? Because you know that AJ's going to dodge it.
Because I'm on par with the wrestlers, and I want to prove that I'm on par with the wrestlers.
Okay, I'm going to beat you up because you're doing Shane McMahon's gimmick right now.
Yeah, well, this was what he's doing. This is what this was, and I also thought the finish. I mean, I understand it. But if AJ was a heel and he was that intimidated from Shane McMahon being a surprisingly good wrestler, I know it's WrestleMania, but like, give me a thumb to the eye. Give me, it doesn't even have to be like full-fledged fuck finish, but give me something. Give me something rather than Shane just being dumb and missing
This was as AJ was turning face.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I didn't like this match at all. From start to finish, I thought I was going to really enjoy this, and this ended up being my least favorite of these 3 matches. And
which is ironic because it's my favorite one of the 3 because it's the one that didn't involve that many weapons.
Yeah, well, but they still couldn't help themselves from doing a coast-to-coast spot in the middle of a match. At least
that's Shane in particular.
Yeah, at least they're unabashed about doing that when it was the other matches. I don't know. This didn't do it for me. And I think it's just more of like what it represented and how it led to the Shane McMahon that we ended up with for so long. So you be the judge, folks. Let us know what you think about these 3 matches in the comment section below. Did you like them? Did you hate them? Was it somewhere in between my opinion and Skylar's opinion? Let us know. But now, we have to, as if we haven't talked about this man enough already, we have to now talk about the boy wonder, Shane McMahon.
Ching, bling, bling, catching cheddar.
Yeah. You hit the $, then your cash don't pocket.
Matter.
I don't know all the lyrics. I used to know
Shane's theme song.
I used to know all the lyrics back in the day. I just don't now. So Shane has been a part of obviously WWE for very, very, very long time. But we only really started seeing him in the early days of the Attitude Era, except for a couple sporadic "Here Are My Kids" appearances.
Right, but he appeared way before that, and he's been with WWE longer than we have known him. Yeah. Because
he was born into it.
Because right after high school, after he graduated high school in 1987, while he's attending college, he's also a referee.
Yep. Yeah, Shane had a lot of matches as a referee. That's how Shane ended up becoming kind of a personality before he ever showed up on, I believe it was Heat, right?
Well, here's the thing. Do you know that Shane McMahon was part of the 1988 Royal Rumble?
As a referee?
Yep, it was one of his first matches.
Yep.
That he refereed.
Yep. Can you imagine that being part of the first Royal Rumble as a referee?
That had to be really cool.
That had to have been super cool. And also confusing as hell, because that was the first time that gimmick had ever been conceptualized and put into practice. So I'm guessing it's a hard one to officiate.
Which, by the way, folks, if you go back and watch the 1988 Royal Rumble, it's a bad match.
It's terrible. It's actually terrible. It's like, I've wanted so bad to give that the benefit of the doubt, but it's not good. The second one is way good, but the first one was not good.
Well, that was before they figured out the formula to make a good Royal Rumble match, and Pat Patterson worked his magic.
Right, yeah. Great concept, but it took some retooling.
But it's kind of funny how Shane spent a decade as a referee, and it was, when he came up in 98, very much he was set up to be the future of WWF.
Oh, yeah. The spoon in his mouth, the heir apparent, as JR would oft call him.
Yeah. Sorry, I got nothing for that transition.
Yeah, that's really all it was. He was just called the heir apparent. He was groomed up. Eventually he showed up as commentator with, I think, Al Snow. I want to say, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that was the original Sunday Night Heat commentary team.
No, it was with Jim Cornette and Kevin Kelly.
Oh, well, I mean, shortly thereafter, Shane McMahon became a part of that announce table.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I forget. My bad. My bad.
So, and Cornette and Kevin Kelly, I mean, what a pairing those two are. But like Vince before, Shane started at the commentary team, and that worked out for a little while until it started being more valuable to have him more involved with, Vince McMahon's toadying and the corporation and his feud with Austin.
Because the whole thing is that as much as we would love to see Vince McMahon get his ass kicked all the time, he was a 53-year-old man. So there were certain things that Vince McMahon couldn't do that Shane could easily do because he's younger.
Yeah, and there was a lot that Shane had to learn in that time. He was obviously still very green, as we mentioned, but, he had personality. And he had a different personality than Vince. And I think that that's something that was allowed to be showcased in that time that I think Shane did a really good job with. As far as creating a gimmick for himself that really wasn't that far off of what Shane McMahon really was.
Right, which is that I am the rich man's son. I can do whatever I want because I have so much money and so much power. And if I want to win a championship, sure, I'll win a championship. If I want to wrestle a wrestling match, sure, I'll wrestle a wrestling match. But you can't do anything about it. You can't stop me because I have all this money and power and friends.
Right. And then the match we saw with King of the Ring, and I know I'm glossing a little bit here. And then, of course, the big SummerSlam fall.
Well, hold on. Before that, he beats X-Pac for the European Championship.
That's right. And I believe that match was when Triple H finally joined and turned on Kid. And it was. Yep. I remember that. I remember watching that match when Triple H turned on DX and joined the corporation.
And specifically, they had the rematch at Mania 15 with Triple H and the Mean Street Posse helping out Shane.
Yes. Yep. That I distinctly remember. But that didn't really give Shane the highlight or the showcase or we should pay attention to him quite like falling off that big scaffold into the wood and crash pad.
Well, it started the reputation of Shane McMahon being a daredevil, a high flyer, and willing to take these bumps, which is one of the most amazing things because Shane didn't have to take those bumps. He's the son of the owner. He has millions of dollars. He doesn't have to do these things.
Well, I would counter that, yeah, he did. And I think that that's kind of what we were touching on when we were talking about multi-generational talent, is that Shane knew he was going to have to do something very different to separate himself from other people, and especially because he is not only the boss's son, he's Vince McMahon's son. That carries a whole different set of weights to put on your shoulders, and doing something that ridiculous was going to be the way that Shane McMahon developed an identity of his own.
Right. It's just an interesting way to go about it, nearly dying for the sake of entertainment.
Yeah. Oh, and that was what turned into Shane's gimmick. I mean, throughout 99, 2000, we didn't really see as much Shane wrestling in 2000.
I'm pretty sure it's just because he didn't have to again.
Yeah, but then we get the match with Kurt Angle. And we have and that matchup was absolutely brutal.
Well, hold on. Before the Kurt Angle matchup, we have to talk about SummerSlam when he jumps off the stage.
Well, yeah, that's what, 2000, right? That was the other fall that he made.
Yeah, the one against Blackman.
Right. Yeah, the second one. where he jumped off the stage.
The first one was just a painful bump he took. The second one was him literally praying to God before he did the 50-foot jump.
Yes. Yep. That was, and you start to think about it and you wonder, was any of that in poor taste given the whole Owen Hart situation, not just a few months prior? I didn't really think about that until now, but like, it had only been like 3 or 4 months from that first 99 one. I guess not because he just straight up fell and it wasn't an accident, but like doing a jump from that high up.
It was poor taste.
Yeah,
I don't think
think
it wasn't meant to be poor taste. It was just
hindsight's 2020.
Hindsight's 2020. But then 2001 again, the match with Kurt Angle and the feud with Kurt Angle was great.
Yeah, and that match was brutal. I mean, going and hitting the wrong glass, and then being adamant about hitting the wrong glass and breaking through that glass, then hitting one that was then trying to go through another glass, and that glass didn't break, so they had to go through it a 4th time. And I think that was the one where either Shane or Kurt or both of them broke their tailbone.
I can look it up.
I think it was Kurt, but I think Shane also got pretty significantly injured. There was talks about them stopping that match after going through the glass the first time.
It was Kurt that broke his tailbone.
Yeah, and they kept going. And they kept doing
Think about this. The guy that wasn't going through the glass was the one that his tailbone got broken.
Yeah, well, because Shane, dumped on top of him a few times. He'd hit the glass, Shane hit the glass, and just crashed onto Kurt. It was nasty. It was nasty. But that was the kind of thing that Shane was doing. And that's what made Shane so appealing. But another part of what made Shane good was that he wasn't around all the time.
Right. Also, by the way, that match, bloody as fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was in the middle of the invasion, I believe. Or no, that was prior to the invasion.
It was in the middle.
Middle of the invasion, right. So in the middle of the invasion, so Shane had bought WCW at this point, and they were doing that whole feud, which of course was monumental in and of itself. One of Shane's biggest moments, even though I really do not like that ugly brown turtleneck he was wearing. It was still a huge moment for Shane.
Right, who can forget the moment where Shane McMahon reveals that he has bought WCW?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge moment. And then even Shane wrestling in that match at Survivor Series that year. Even though I think he was the first to get eliminated, but still, Shane's got guts. That was his gimmick. Shane's got guts.
It's just one of those things where Shane was a recurring wrestler. And that's what helped, is that we didn't see him all the time. So when we did see him, all his stuff was great.
Right. And it made you be like, oh yeah, I forgot that he actually can do some stuff. And then he has that weird ambulance match a couple years later with Kane. Where that whole feud was about shocking Shane's testicles. And setting JR on fire. That was...
Yeah. Well, that was Kane. That was Kane being a monster, which... But hold on, let's go back a second. Do you blame Shane McMahon for any part that he had in the invasion angle failing?
No, because they as a whole rushed that. That wasn't Shane's fault that the whole creative team decided we got to do this now instead of waiting for the big contracts to expire, so then we can get the actual people we need to make this angle viable. I don't think it's his fault that that the whole creative team as a whole decided to force it.
I think that's fair, but it's just one of those disappointing things where if the invasion angle had been done correctly, Shane McMahon would have been more received well for it.
Oh, sure.
Sure. He's kind of a footnote in that story, which, oof.
There are a lot of footnotes in that story. DDP came out and stalked The Undertaker's wife.
Let's move on to 2006.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that's Shane's fault. I think that there's a lot of things in that invasion angle they flubbed pretty significantly. And
the feud with DX in 2006, as we saw with the Shawn Michaels thing.
I liked it. I liked this Shane. Because Shane had personality here, but he was still being like his father's son. You know, it called back to kind of the flavor of what they were doing with Austin 7 years earlier. Only it was a different story with different people, and then Shane fights God with Vince McMahon in a tag match.
It was the perfect middle ground between 1999 Shane McMahon and 2016 Shane McMahon.
Yeah.
Is 2006 Shane, because he had the whole father-son thing, but he was still stepping into his own thing, and it was very clear that Shane was doing things his way, right. And they were different from Vince's, but they were close enough, like, you know what, it reminds me of Vince or something like that.
Right. His work was better, but his gimmick hadn't changed as drastically as it would. And that was a big part of that. I really liked that feud. And then the last time I remember really, really liking Shane McMahon was the feud in 2009 with Randy Orton.
Well, that was when Randy Orton was at his hottest.
Yeah.
And he was having this feud where he was basically taking down the entire McMahon family. And he was doing some of the most
heinous.
I hated this Randy Orton.
Yeah.
Legitimately.
Yeah.
Because of the things that he did to the McMahon family. He basically killed Vince. He DDT'd Stephanie. He basically broke Batista. He killed off Shane McMahon, because we didn't see Shane from this point on.
Until Triple H brought him and Vince back.
No,
at
but
the
even
same time,
then,
but
yeah, but then Shane, he broke his leg, according to Randy Orton's storyline, and Shane was basically gone from WWE, and this was the perfect way to write him off.
Well, that was the thing, is that at this time, Shane wanted to go and pursue his own business interests. And I think Shane knew he had to leave. I think Shane knew he had to leave in order to see if he could be successful elsewhere and then come back when the time was right. So we didn't get Shane from 2009 to 2016 after another match with DX, which
hold on.
was not necessary.
In between this, let's talk about this pause in the middle. Because there's an interesting thing that happens during this pause in the middle between 2009 and 2016. While Shane is doing his businesses away and doing his other things, Triple H comes into power. And Triple H starts doing NXT, as we have talked about.
Yep.
Wrestling What If? What if Shane McMahon had never left and was still with WWE during this time? Does Triple H get as much power as he does? Do we still see NXT? Or does Shane McMahon do his version of WWE?
I would say still yes. Because I don't think Shane was as integral a part of talent development the way that Triple H wanted to be. I think they have two different, very uniquely different job sets, and I think that those would have been separated accordingly. You know, we may not have gotten the exact flavor of NXT that we got with Triple H just being on his own, but do I think that NXT doesn't exist if Shane's there? No. I think that pretty much still runs its course.
Fair enough. Also, the relationship between Triple H and Shane is weird. Because it kind of felt like Shane was going to be the one to take over WWE eventually whenever Vince McMahon moved on.
Yep.
But then it kind of seemed like Triple H became that person.
Well, and now we don't know who the hell's going to take it. Now I think the answer is neither of them.
Now it's going to be Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be either one of those two guys. And it's strange because I don't think that there was ever, you know, I don't know for sure, but it never felt like there was any heat on either end about that, you know, because I don't think anyone was really thinking that far. You know, they're kind of working into the moment and like, how do we help the talent of the future and help the business of the future? And if that meant they were going to work it together or one was going to take in the other, you know, who knows? But I don't think that those two, while the dynamic is definitely weird from a peripheral view, I'm not sure that there was any heat in between those guys, realistically speaking, because they seem to have gotten along fine in the years since. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I wasn't there.
it also, well, I mean, the other thing too is that not seeing Shane was great because during this time we kept getting the authority stuff and Vince McMahon's heel character, which was getting old as hell.
Or Triple H and Stephanie's version of Vince McMahon's heel character,
which was old as hell because we had seen it before. Granted, Triple H and Stephanie's authority was much more mature than McMahon-Helmsley era.
True. Definitely true. But I will also counter with saying that Shane McMahon got one of the best pops on Monday Night Raw in the past decade when he came back.
And Michael Cole no-sold it.
Oh, wait, you expected Michael Cole to accurately sell him? Michael Cole has had one good call in his entire career, and that was the heist of the century at WrestleMania 31.
Mankind.
Okay, fair.
He's had two.
All right, two in 20 plus years. So I'm not surprised Cole missed the moment. But Shane came out and started being like, listen, the ratings are down, the interest is down, there's way less people here, and y'all gotta fix this. And then they put him into the weirdest feud with The Undertaker.
Well, the whole thing was that Vince McMahon was like, you know what? You can do it. You can have control of Monday Night Raw if you win against The Undertaker. And then he loses against The Undertaker. And then still gets control.
And then Vince is like, all right, well, you won't get Raw, but we're going to give you SmackDown. How about that? Huh?
No. If anything, the stipulation should have been you have a match against The Undertaker. Vince McMahon comes out on Raw to gloat about the fact that Shane wrestled against The Undertaker and lost. And Shane goes, no. You just said I had to wrestle him. You didn't say I have to win. Therefore, I still get Monday Night Raw.
You're going way too big brain for this company, Sky. You're going way too big brain for this company.
No, instead, we're going to have Shane and Stephanie feud with each other until Shane gets SmackDown.
Yeah, and that was not interesting.
Although, it helped usher in arguably some of the best television in a while for WWE, which was mid-2016 SmackDown. I
will say that Shane was still fresh at this time. People were still happy to see him. And with his whole Land of Opportunity thing and like the way that show was structured and the way it was written, you know, I give a credit to Ryan Ward here because he was actually doing a lot of the writing that was successful and was actually getting approved and being allowed to be done rather than Vince going and making all the changes to it. You know, and
not to mention the influence that Daniel Bryan and Shane had because they were both involved in the creative processes, especially Daniel Bryan.
Yep, Shane, Daniel Bryan, I believe Road Dogg. I believe Brian James was a part of the team at this time. He was part of that group that was making that before he overstayed his welcome. And it was 2016 SmackDown was a good time. They had good chemistry. They had good matches. You know, it's the only company and period in time that could possibly get me interested in a Miz and Ziggler feud. But they did. They did it. You know, they made James Ellsworth work. Think about that. They made James Ellsworth work with AJ Styles for the title, and it worked. It was
James
good television.
Ellsworth beat AJ Styles 3 or 4 times, and it was compelling TV every time.
Yeah.
But then again, that's also AJ Styles being at the top of his game.
True, but again, it takes a village. And Shane was a big part of that. And then we saw the match that we saw, which I will give credit to this. At the time, and in the context of where all of us were at the time, the match was good for the context of the rest of the show. Because the only other redeeming quality of that WrestleMania was the Hardys coming back.
Well, there are other things, but I mean, the other things are meh.
They shell in comparison. And realistically, AJ and Shane had the best actual match, one-on-one match on the card.
Because it certainly wasn't Randy Orton with his snake on the ground wrestling against the Fiend and the...
It wasn't Owens and Jericho flubbing around for 6 or 7 minutes.
Nor was it Brock Lesnar and Goldberg wrestling for 6 minutes. Oh, God damn it!
Although, that match... Although, to be fair...
the whole Goldberg and Brock Lesnar thing around the show, damn it.
To be fair, that was probably the best encounter that they had. That 6-minute match. It honestly, it was a lot more fun. It wasn't going to be a wrestling classic, but it was fun. for what it was at the time. And if Goldberg had ended his career there, none of us would be complaining. But that's why
still would be.
That's why we're complaining. But still.
But again, WrestleMania 33 is a weird show. John Cena and Nikki Bella defeating The Miz and Maurice.
And then a proposal.
That didn't work.
That did not work. And
and Seth Rollins beating Triple H.
That match was also good, just fucking long. It just took forever.
Guess how many minutes that match was?
So wasn't it something like 33?
31.
Yeah, I was going to say somewhere like something stupid long. At least to AJ and Shane's credit, they only went like 20. It was.
Oh, and the other thing too, I didn't realize this. They were the first match of the main show. I mean,
correct.
They had 3 pre-show matches. They got the crowd fresh. No wonder that match is good.
Yeah, which also is another part of it because crowd reaction matters, and the crowd ate that match up. They did. We didn't mention it during the review, but the crowd was way into that match.
When they weren't chanting for the chairman.
That's right. And then
the feud with Kevin Owens in 2017 was also good, and that Hell in a Cell match.
That Hell in a Cell match was probably the last great Shane McMahon match that I can think of. Because I really, really liked that match. Even just thinking about it in hindsight, I'm like, everything I remember about that was fun. A lot of it was just a match. It wasn't even like the actual, I mean, they used the cage a lot, but it wasn't just wasn't like the matches we just saw with Austin and McMahon and with Shawn Michaels. There was actually wrestling in that Hell in a Cell match and brutality.
Plus, it helped lead to Sami Zayn's heel turn, which Sami Zayn's heel character is great.
And was sorely needed for Sami at the time.
And it also led to that tag match at WrestleMania 34 with the return of Daniel Bryan, and I can't fault them.
No, and that match was also quite good. Even though
Shane was clearly the 4 for the 4 in that ring. Well,
yeah, but he wasn't. At that point, he wasn't trying to prove that he was as good as the other 3. Not really. That wasn't the point of the matchup. The matchup was to showcase that Daniel Bryan's back. And Shane understood that, and that was fine. I was totally okay with that. And this was a Shane McMahon that I was still fine with, even though they had that really weird Survivor Series matchup that year when Owens and Zayn just like bailed on Shane, and then it was like, what was it, Triple H and Braun Strowman and Kurt Angle against Shane, and then Triple H turned on Angle, and then Triple H tried to turn on Braun, and it was just very weird.
No, it was Triple H turning on Angle because Triple H was going to have that feud with Angle and lead to the match with Ronda Rousey.
Oh, right.
Again, everything in wrestling is connected.
Yep.
For good or bad.
But at this point, Shane was not insufferable. You still kind of cared what he was doing.
Until he competed in the Greatest Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia.
Well, the Greatest Royal Rumble wasn't even the problem. It was the Crown Jewel Best in the World tournament that started it. That's what really... Because he showed up and had a 4-minute match after the tournament was over with Dolph Ziggler. And not to say that...
40 seconds, by the way.
To be fair, who in that tournament would have been okay being crowned best in the world?
Bobby Lashley.
Yeah, that's it. Because Ziggler wouldn't have. What would Ziggler have done with it? I'm not saying Shane deserved to have it, but what would Ziggler have done with it?
Okay, let me give you the 8 wrestlers, okay? You tell me whether or not they deserve it or not.
All right, let's do it.
Seth Rollins.
Deserves it.
Bobby Lashley.
Deserves it.
Kurt Angle.
Deserves it.
Dolph Ziggler, yeah. Rey Mysterio.
I don't know if he would be able to get any length out of it, honestly, as far as his gimmick goes, like going forward. I mean, he would, just on paper, deserves it, but I don't know if he specifically would have been able to do much with it.
Randy Orton.
Could have way used that.
Jeff Hardy.
Probably the same thing as Ray. Probably wouldn't have been able to make much out of it afterwards, but still, by the numbers, deserving.
The Miz.
He'd take legs with it. He would have made that with a heel. He would have used that at a time. This was before Miz was a little too insufferable. Miz could have taken that and used that.
Hold on. So you just admitted that of the 8 people that were in that tournament, the one person that who should not have been in the finals was in the finals with Shane McMahon, and that's Dolph Ziggler.
Yes, correct. Because Miz could have used that. Dolph wouldn't have used that. They weren't going to do anything with Dolph Ziggler at that point. That horse had long left the barn. And instead we got Shane McMahon super sweaty in just like a tank top. He didn't even dress to compete. He wasn't even dressed in wrestling gear.
But that was Shane McMahon's gimmick, is that he would just dress in like a jeans and whatever shirt.
I know, but dress him in the jersey though. Give him a Crown Jewel jersey. Why have him there in just a tank top and shorts or pants or whatever? You know, I didn't understand that one, but then, you know, it turns. At first, he doesn't even turn heel with it. At first, he runs babyface for like 6 months before he finally starts to turn heel and starts to use his whole best in the world thing, which was getting good heel heat until it long overstayed its welcome.
Hold on. Who did Shane McMahon feud with at first with the best in the world gimmick?
God, I can't remember.
The Miz.
Right.
But by attacking Miz's father and wrestling the Miz at Mania 35.
Oh yes. You know what though? That feud actually had legs. It really did. But then Shane McMahon sweated himself out of his shirt to win the cage match afterwards. And then we never heard of it again. You know? Because Miz never got back at Shane. They never got the revenge. So, you know, the feud at the time was fine. But then, like usual, they didn't do anything with it.
And then Shane gets into a feud with Roman Reigns and has to get backup in the form of Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley. Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre losing to Roman Reigns and The Undertaker in a no-hold-barred tag match at Extreme Rules.
That was surprisingly good. I remember like being really surprised at how well that match went. Because it looked like it was going to be a garbage match on paper, but then it ended up being like, all right.
Because they left The Undertaker to do as little work as possible.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can't disagree with that. But I think what started to become the problem is that we started seeing Shane all the time. And it wouldn't stop. It was just...
Until Kevin Owens mercifully gets rid of him.
All Shane all the time until Kevin Owens finally just has a way with it and does in Shane. And then he tries to start Raw Underground, and he's not Dick Clark. You know, he's not Gene Rayburn. You know, he's not going to be a guy making this. Gene Rayburn, that's a deep-cutted reference for you kids out there. And that's, you know, it wasn't going to fit Shane. Not that Raw Underground was ever going to be successful, but this...
And then the feud with Braun Strowman.
And then, yes, Brown stupid in a weird cage match that had a toolbox and a bucket on top of the ring. And the more we saw Shane, the less we wanted to see him. Because Shane, you know, like we said, the gimmick had changed to now he believed that he was just as much of a wrestler as all the other wrestlers.
And very much the thing about Shane McMahon is that he wrestles like a video game character because all his moves are video game spots.
Yeah.
He's a spot monkey.
Without the physique of a spot monkey.
Well, he's a spot monkey without the physique of a spot monkey, but he's a spot monkey who doesn't have the wrestling to go with it.
Right, and I think part of that is just the way that the wrestling had changed. Because, you know, that slower paced style or the mayhem kind of style that they were doing, you know, that he was doing before worked for him. But when you're trying to get him to chain wrestle at 100 miles an hour the way that the actual wrestlers do, it's always going to look sloppy. It's always going to look bad. And he put himself into a position to where he was always going to look bad. And I think that was the biggest disservice to Shane's gimmick was trying to match the pace of modern wrestling. And it just wasn't going to work for him that way. You know, it didn't, and that's why this thing at the Rumble was so poorly received.
Well, also, at this point, Shane McMahon's personality, this is one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, is Shane McMahon's personality. He was always a likable person. He's probably the most likable of the McMahons because
True.
he's generally the most down-to-earth of them.
Well, he was.
But there's still that little bit of an ego that he always bought into his own hype, that he is the son of Vince McMahon. I am Shane McMahon. I'm going to own this all one day. That's always been a part of him.
Definitely
Even
more
as
so
he
in
has
recent
aged.
years.
Definitely more so in recent years, as he aged out of it, and then he's kind of aged back into it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very odd way to go around it, but that's very true.
I don't know. It's a very interesting case study of the son of a promoter who very much did things differently than his father did, and did things exactly like his father did.
Yeah, for better or worse, and he got a little bit of both. Now, here's the question. As we head towards, as we hit the go home button here on the 100th episode of the Court-Martail podcast, what is next for Shane? What do you think? What do you think happens?
I think Shane's done with wrestling.
Yeah.
He's not going to AEW. Okay, let's make that very clear. He's not going to AEW.
Not a chance. There's more of a chance that Shane and Triple H co-start a wrestling promotion than there is of Shane McMahon showing up at AEW.
Oh, you just
made a little
my brain
thought
just
there, huh?
exploded at the idea because they could do it.
They totally could do it. They totally could do it.
Because Shane McMahon is a business owner. He does have the money. Oh my God, you're right. He could.
Well, it's kind of like what I was saying. Shane and Triple H have two very different sets of skills that are both very valuable to success. Shane was, in that time that Shane was out from 09 to 16, his holding companies in, I believe he owned a cellular network in China. He had a couple other Asian Southeast Asian companies that he ran, as well as some things in the States, all of which turned profits. He was successful in business. It's not to say Shane is a successful business person. If Shane really wanted to, and Triple H really wanted to, and Vince was so bullheaded that he didn't want to give it up, all they'd have to do, I think there'd be plenty of wrestlers who would go to bat to work for Triple H and Shane McMahon over Vince McMahon. And maybe even over Tony Khan, because, at least with Triple H, he knows how to book.
It would be one of those things where if you could imagine a company owned by Shane McMahon, run by a combination of Triple H and William Regal, I would sign with that company before I would sign with WWE or AEW. And especially if you're one of the NXT guys like Keith Lee. Yeah,
and realistically, pro wrestling needs a third major promotion. It does. Having these two billionaire juggernauts is really hurting. We were talking about the independent scene a couple weeks ago, and how AEW has plucked a lot of its talent, and how the indie scene's going to have to figure out how to do it. Really, a third promotion for a place to work would do wonders for the professional wrestling business. But it's all really going to depend on what. This is all just pipe dreams of us hoping that Triple H decides, screw it, I'm going off on my own, and Shane already on his own, doing, wanting to be still in wrestling enough to start his own company. I personally think that Shane's just going to let the heat go away, and then he'll be back by September.
I think Shane's probably going to be done with wrestling personally, just because I don't think he has anything else that he can do that he wants to do.
Well, but it also depends on how much money WWE wants to throw at him to keep him into the fold. Because I think a lot of this was just directing the heat on Shane so it doesn't fall on other people involved because of how bad the show was. I think a lot of ways.
Here's the thing: is that Shane McMahon has survived a helicopter crash, so he can survive anything.
Well, that's just it. And while this show has been rapidly helicoptering toward the mountain, waiting to crash, we're gonna veer off course, and we're gonna wait for next week. So it is time to take our first commercial break. What a show! What a hauler of a show! And if you have stuck around for this long, I truly applaud you. Thank you very much for being a part of our 100th episode. Sky, I will see you next week to hear about your debut of your Season 3 NWL show. I'm sure it's going to be a banger.
And hopefully it won't be as long as this show.
Hopefully. Well, if it is, it's my fault, not your fault, because the ACPW always runs longer than yours.
just because you're a Triple H promotion.
I wear that badge with pride. But that's to say so. Stay tuned, folks. We got a lot of good things coming on. Here's to the next 100. That is the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg. I am your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty, and we'll see you for the next 100 right after this.